Former spoiled kids confess the exact moment that made them realize. My little crash into reality happened when I asked a friend what his parents were getting him for his half-birthday, and he just stared at me like I had 3 heads. That was the moment where I realized that getting a $200 gift every 6 months just for existing wasn't a universal human experience. Well, we've had one birthday, yes, but what about half-birthday? Getting my first job and seeing how much effort it takes just to earn what I used to take for granted. Same here, to be honest. My first paycheck looked decent until I had to pay for gas, food, and my phone bill in the same week, and it basically vanished. That was the moment I was like, oh, this is why my parents were always saying no. For a while, I didn't realize private school meant my grandparents would pay $30,000 a year for me to go to a fancy one. I had no idea you had to pay for it. I just thought you had to be smart enough to get in, and then that everything was free. I pretty quickly figured out that this wasn't the case once I got to high school, made friends from other normal schools, and realized some of the dumbest people I've ever met went exclusively to private school their whole lives. Super embarrassing, I know. Would you say children should know how much their education costs? I think at a certain age, yes. Kids shouldn't be worried about that stuff when they're really young, but I'm glad my parents talked to me about it when they did, even if I did feel it was a bit late. I was just a dumb 14 or 15-year-old, but I do think that the assumption I had that I was smart enough to go to private school when other kids weren't could have done harm to how I viewed or treated others subconsciously. I'm very glad that my parents told me how much it cost in the end. The last thing you want is spoiled kids growing up thinking they're better than everyone else because of some intrinsic quality they have, rather than they just had the privilege of money and the connections that it buys you. I think it builds more empathetic people this way. Not me, but my boyfriend told me that he had his first epiphany of how privileged he was when he had to write college application essays about something that he had overcome in life, and he realized he had never struggled before. When I was about 8, my family had to wait in a long line for something. I don't remember what for. I loudly asked my parents, "Where's our line? This one is too long." Apparently, I was so used to waiting in shorter VIP lines or skipping them entirely. Luckily, my parents realized what I was turning into and stopped it before it got any worse. "Mum, Dad, this is the poor line. We can't just stand here with the poors." Honestly, it's refreshing that there's a number of well-off parents here prepared to cut off their kids over pampering before it's too late. For my 16th birthday, my parents gifted me a red convertible, but I legit threw a fit over it because the car was red and not blue. So they kept that car for themselves and got me a new one. Just a small amount of context to show you how spoiled I was. Years later, I needed volunteer hours for various college applications. There was an 8-week summer camp that I thought was perfect. 8 weeks as a counselor where I didn't really have to do anything? Sign me up. This summer camp was hosted by AmeriCorps. It served the underprivileged in my area for free if the family couldn't afford it, or for something like $25 a week if they could. There was this kid. Lovely little thing, but they refused to take off their shoes. Going to the pool for the day, they'd keep the shoes on. They were adamant about never taking their shoes off. Almost combative about it. We knew something was wrong then. When there was a quiet nap time, I took the kid to the office of the person running the camp and just sat down to talk to them. We talked about a lot of stuff, and then I was able to get them to open up about why they never took their shoes off. Turns out their shoes were 3 sizes too small. They took off their shoes and their socks were covered in old blood plus new blood. Their poor feet were wrecked from wearing these shoes for God knows how long. I grabbed a first aid kit and then cleaned up his wounds the best I could and wrapped them in bandages. I threw his socks and shoes away. On my lunch hour, I sat in my car crying for what felt like hours. I got my crap together, went to a shoe store and brought them 3 pairs of shoes in 3 different sizes. 1 pair that fit them now and the other 2 as their feet grew. It was such a harrowing, humbling moment, a massive wake-up call. That camp taught me a lot, and I came away with a lot of stories much like that from many of the kids that attended the camp. I spent 2 years as an AmeriCorps, then joined their Vista program for another year. I started volunteering to work with at-risk kids. I became a big sister. I did everything I could to give back to my community. It's over 20 years later, I still volunteer and help whenever or however I can. When I look back on myself from that time, I can't believe how entitled and spoiled I acted and was. It was a life-changing experience, one that I'll always be thankful for. I went to a private school, and in my class we read a short story, can't remember what it was called, and it was about poverty, and my teacher said basically, "No offense, but you guys kinda live in a bubble." And one kid says, word for word, "I don't live in a bubble. My family summers in Italy." Using summer as a verb tells you everything you need to know about someone. Mine happened when I went to university. Suddenly, I realized that not everyone got their own car at 18 and went on vacations twice a year. Almost everyone had either taken out student loans or had to work part-time. It was a real eye-opener. My parents weren't the richest, but when I got my first job out of state, my parents packed up my car with my stuff, helped me drive halfway across the country, helped me find an apartment, and got me settled in. Think of figuring out grocery locations, banking locations, various other stores, all when MapQuest reigned supreme and none of us had ever been there. I didn't think much of it at first, but that set me up for the rest of my life. It's barely adjacent to the topic, but I just want to share this story with this group. At college, I had a friend whose dad was a billionaire, with a capital B, but had never had one of these realizations. He didn't need to. He was raised right. At college, he'd eat plain pasta, wore clothes with holes in, would scrape together a load of coins so he could afford to come on a night out. He was just like the rest of us because his parents didn't spoil him. They taught him the value of money, and he had to earn what he spent. We had no idea his parents had money. He couldn't afford a car like the rest of us. Then one day his dad retired and gave his sons a sizable inheritance. I watched as his bank account went from $112 to over $400 million. And you know what he bought the next day? The second-hand, cheap hatchback he'd been saving up for months. After he graduated, he traveled, going to economically deprived areas and building schools to teach English. He sleeps on the floor in the school, teaches there for 6 months to make sure it's all running properly, buys all the kids' clothes and iPads and laptops, and then he flies off somewhere else and does it all again. I've never met anyone like him before or since. Genuinely one of the nicest people I've ever known, and the only person I've ever met who's wholly deserving of that kind of money. On our family's trips growing up, we always had a suite with single rooms, full kitchen and views, or our own entire rooms. We never had to share sleeping areas. Freshman year of college, I went on a beach trip with a bunch of guys and we had to share rooms. Of course, I acted normal, but this was a very foreign concept to me. First time flying economy. I asked the flight attendant where the button was to make the seat recline all the way down, and she just stared at me. My friend next to me whispered, that's not a thing in economy. I was 19 and genuinely didn't know that planes had different classes of service. I thought business class was just a term for people traveling for work. The shame still haunts me. At 19 years old, I took a flight from Washington, D.C. to Brazil for a university program. I sat next to a fellow student who was absolutely baffled as we sat down. "What the hell is this?" he asked. He reached his arm out in front and touched the seat in front of him, then vaguely gestured at our seating arrangement. "I don't understand why the seats are so close together." I had to explain to him that I sat in these seats every single flight I've ever taken, as have most people. He was so angry about it. Excuse me, flight attendant," snaps Fingers. "Look, I don't want to complain, but there are other people around me. What do you mean that's just how it is?" "Oh, for goodness sake, just get me a Paul Roger 1962 and a Gucci sleeping mask then, I suppose." When I was growing up, my parents could afford for me to play any sport, instrument, or whatever other hobby I'd like. When I was around 12, I was listening to a friend say she was deciding between volleyball and soccer. I was like, "Why don't you do both?" And she said, because I can't afford it, in a way that she was irritated with my obliviousness. That little exchange truly changed my perspective and made me realize not only did I have the privilege of my parents being able to give me so much, but that other people could see what I had and know they didn't. It made me feel so bad. Up until that point, it felt like I was just like everyone else and vice versa, but this interaction made me forever sensitive to and aware of financial privileges, wealth divides, and so on and so forth. I watched this happen in real time to a friend. We were driving to Canada because a beer I designed the label for was having a big launch party, and my husband and said friend came with me to celebrate. We were crossing the border, and the car in front of us was more Bondo and duct tape than car. This friend said out loud, "Jesus, why would you drive that around instead of just buying a new one?" And we were like, "Cars are expensive, man." And he responded with, "Well, he can afford gas, so he's got a job. He can absolutely buy something that isn't falling apart." We asked him how much a minimum wage was. And let me tell you, the silence was deafening. He had no idea and assumed it was like $20 an hour or something. I grew up under the poverty line and spent many memorable years food insecure. Took the rest of the trip to explain how expensive it is to be poor. He looked like he'd swallowed a box of gravel and apologized for being so ignorant. The poor guy was really mortified that he had no idea that some people drive crappy cars because it's their only option and not because they're lazy or slobs. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? When my grandparents gave me 40 grand to go to college every year for 3 years. I'm waiting for my son to figure this one out. Paid his tuition to Johnson & Wales for 4 years, only to have him not finish his degree. I'm tempted to go buy a bunch of prop movie money, invite him over for a barbecue, and toss the pile on the grill. Talking to customers where their utilities are getting cut off every other month makes me realize just having power and food in the fridge is a frickin' blessing, even if you did have a crappy childhood. I wasn't super spoiled, but I certainly didn't grow up desperate. My friend brought over his tent that he got for his birthday, and my dog ruined it. He was very upset, and I didn't understand why. Your parents can just get you a new one. What's the big deal? Was my thought. Then I went to his house shortly after, and for lunch we split 1 can of tuna fish and a lot of mayo on thin white bread between 6 people. That's when I realized why I had a super goose and he had a 4th time handed down thrift store Huffy. I never had to participate in the console wars. I always had every system and game I ever wanted to play, along with peripherals and CRT, monitors, or big screen setups, including brand new gaming PCs every couple of years. My boyfriend always talks about how poor his family was when he was growing up, and then follows it up with a casual remark about all the consoles, computers, and stereo equipment they had. And his grandpa bought his parents' house for them too. And they regularly drove around the country to baseball tournaments that his brother participated in, and they had a motorhome. He has since realized in his years dating me that they definitely weren't poor. It took me realizing that I have no survival instincts when it comes to money. I just spend like there will never be an issue. Until now, where there is an issue. I mean, thankfully he was always cool about it, but I bet my reaction to a high school classmate's house reaffirmed how spoiled he was. I grew up in a very small, working-class community, so there wasn't many rich people, but a few. I didn't realize how rich a classmate was until I visited his house for the first time. It was off in the woods, like many of us were, but it was a 3- or 4-story log cabin-esque mansion. His bathroom was the size of my bedroom. We hung out in the finished basement that was a media center with a pool table, kitchenette, and everything. Not only that, but he showed us his dad's tiny home or hunting shack further out in the woods. And my classmate had his own as well. I'm still in awe just thinking about it. At the time, I lived with my grandparents in their manufactured double-wide home where they still live. It was quite the difference. I wasn't spoiled with money, but I didn't realize how good my family was, or at least didn't realize that other families weren't generous, until my freshman year of college. My car wouldn't start, and it was dinner time, and then I had to do a 2-hour tutoring job. I called my dad and he agreed the car needed a battery. I told him I could walk to work and get a ride home, and then to the shop the following AM to buy a new one. When I got back to my dorm, my dad and grandpa were there installing a new battery. They had to drive over an hour each way to do that after 7 p.m. I was grateful, of course, but I wasn't surprised because my family always did things like that. The other kids in the dorm just couldn't believe it. Then I saw how great my life really was and how my parents had truly sacrificed for us, as had my grandparents as well. Not me, but my roommate when I was 22. He was informed by his parents that he had to start paying his own cell phone bill, which would be the only bill he paid. I'll never forget him coming home and sitting down at the table where I was having some cheap meal that I could barely afford. He looked so dejected, so I asked what was going on. He sounded like Eeyore when he said, "My parents are making me pay my cell phone bill. I have to get a job." Always going on trips to premium foreign destinations. I always thought everyone went to similar places on March break or Christmas. Never realized until I was a teenager that I was living a very fortunate life, nor did I know these places were considered premium getaways. Yeah, my family traveled a lot while I was growing up, and far from realizing it meant that we were privileged, I actively resented it and was jealous of the kids who got to play computer games all holidays instead of having to go on hikes or wait on planes in hotel rooms or restaurants while my parents took forever to do what they were doing. I'd like to be able to inflict that same boredom on my kids, but I probably can't afford it. When I realized that not everyone went to Europe and cruises every year, plus belonging to multiple country clubs. My mum grew up in a very wealthy suburb just north of Chicago and didn't want us to grow up there because she didn't like the snobby attitudes. Unfortunately, it just made us a huge target for bullying and being used in the area we moved to. When I thought we were middle class and found out my buddy's dad left them all alone to raise a sister in a bombed-out house with no mother or phone or money at 17, that's when I realized I had a good life. Never wanted for anything. Parents always cared for me and paid for my college. I did not know struggle. When I read someone's confession of hating girls who had dads, I realized I was lucky, because not only did I have a dad, but he went out of his way to make sure I woke up with breakfast every morning before school. When I realized everyone came to my parents for emotional support and love because they didn't get it at home. Like, how freaking hard is it to tell your kids you're proud of them, you love them, or you see them when they try? To let them know that you understand that life can be hard and disappointing, and to listen to them when they're upset without making it a criticism session or about yourself. For me, it was getting my first job in retail. I remember looking at a pair of shoes I wanted and realizing it would take me 3 full shifts of standing on my feet just to afford them. My parents used to just buy them for me without a word, and it hit me how much work I'd actually been skipping my whole life. I had a totally normal middle-class upbringing, but my mum came from old money that they'd lost during the Second World War. This was a whole 10 years before she was even born, but I never heard the end of it, how poor we were in our squalor. We had a 2-bedroom apartment, quite comfortable for our middle class out in the sticks Western Europe area. I can't afford that kind of apartment for myself today. I got to have horseback riding as a hobby. We went on 2-week family vacations to different countries, though always by car. We always had everything, but maybe not the latest brand of clothes. We had 2 cars even, something quite unusual for 1980s or 1990s average Euro Joes. And I literally grew up thinking we were poor because we didn't in fact live in a detached home with a front lawn. Boy, did my jaw drop when I went to college and saw actual poor. And I mean, it's still just Western European socially secure poor. I also got upset with my mum for a long time for having created such a whiny, complainy backdrop to my perfectly normal childhood. I always felt lesser than at school because I didn't have Levi's or Doc Martens or Chucks. Only way into my 20s did I learn that most kids in my school had part-time jobs to afford those things, and that most of my classmates had a lot more shrink-wrapped lives. It had never even occurred to me to get a part-time job, and neither did it occur to my parents. In their bubble, that simply wasn't a thing. My dad had come from a much, much poorer circumstance, and I don't really know how he didn't take my mum's constant squalor comments personally. And it's not like my mum had ever really seen any riches, those were long gone by the time she was born, but I guess she was raised with this inbred feeling of existing as have-beens that my grandparents apparently never got over. As someone who married a spoiled child, just getting them to stop asking their parents for money is step 1 to every problem. Step 2 is stopping their parents from just handing it over. It's crazy to see the difference in what a spoiled child is now. When I was a kid, spoiled meant the kid got all the latest toys and birthday parties at Chuck E. Cheese. These descriptions are like next-level 1%er spoiled. My first real job. I couldn't get my way, and nothing I did could get me my way. On the financial end, when I went to law school and met people who had big-timey lawyers for parents. These people were set for life no matter what they did. My family always helped me. I've got a huge cushion, but these people were set. I was 19 and my card got declined at a gas station. I called my dad expecting him to fix it like he always did. He just said, "Yep, that happens when you spend more money than you have," and he hung up. I sat in that parking lot for probably 10 minutes before I understood what had just happened. I broke my fingernail at a friend's bowling party. His dad went and grabbed fingernail clippers for me. I did not know how to use them because my parents had always cut my nails. Traveled the world and got 2 degrees before I was even 24 with 0 debt. And then I met my wife. Yeah, I'm not a piece of crap, but I was a really ignorant little boy. We did a group privilege exercise where the professor states a true or false, like do your parents own land, for instance, and if it's true to you, you step forward. If false, you step backwards. This was at a community college that I was attending to supplement my transfer to a new university. I was just, whole meters in front of the group. It ripped the edgelord libertarian right out of me. Like many of you writing here, I didn't realize how spoiled and privileged I was until I went away to college. I thought everyone had the life experiences that I had. Also, I've learned a lot about people struggling while being here on the internet. I'm not saying I'm surprised, I knew a lot of people struggled, but I guess I'm still spoiled and privileged. When I was waking up and had a maid dressing me and helping brush my teeth while I was half awake about to go to school. You see, I was 8 or 9 when I had this realization.
What was your I'm in danger moment? So I was walking to my school, and there's this little street with 2 lanes that leads onto the highway that you need to pass to get to my school. I usually wait till everyone has passed since no one respects the yield, but that day, the guy in the right lane actually yielded, which was awesome. So I made my way across. Suddenly, as I passed through the right lane and entered the left lane, before my mind could process anything, my body just straight up stopped moving. I was briefly confused before I felt 2 cars barely graze both my front and backside. Apparently, the guy on the right started driving again as soon as I was out of his lane, and at the same time, a guy behind him was being impatient and jumped to the left lane without stopping for me. So they both passed me at the same time, while I survived by being frozen in the minor gap between the 2. Honestly, my subconscious is the only reason I'm alive today. Something very similar happened to me in high school. I was walking home from school down a very busy street. I was approaching an intersection, but I stopped a few feet from the edge and just froze behind the light pole. At that moment, a car runs a red light, hits the back of a car, and sends it spinning towards me. Car also clipped a motorcycle, sending it flying 40 feet in the air. The car ends up 1 foot away from the light pole. I'm behind, stopping in the area I'd usually wait to cross the street. If I hadn't just stopped, I'd be pretty badly hurt. I was in a bouncy castle at a college ball, and my friend turned the pump off as a prank. My head was sealed in the deflating plastic, and I was suffocating, kicking my legs wildly trying to free myself. I had almost passed out when someone noticed and pulled me out. It would have been quite an monogamous end. Oh yeah, because that's a good prank. Wee! What does this do? Chicka, 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 psh. Roger, would you seriously turn off the pump to a bouncy castle with people inside? Of course not. Only when it's funny. Come on. It's only a prank. When I was about 14, I chucked a teen angst tantrum and went for an angry walk in the bushland behind my house. Didn't take my phone, didn't tell anyone where I was going, just stormed out. It started raining pretty heavily after about 45 minutes, so I turned back to head home. But a bridge I had crossed had been washed away and the creek was rising very rapidly. I stupidly skidded down the embankment to see if I could cross, but didn't realize the rain had made it too slippery for me to be able to climb back up. I vividly remember standing on that little patch of rock thinking, haha, I might die. I didn't. I climbed onto a rock ledge, waited out the storm, and managed to make my way back up the embankment and return by a different route. By that point, had been gone for about 4 hours and had escaped death only to be almost killed by my parents. My intoxicated friend knocked over another guy's pint by accident, and then his drunken brain decided he could take on the guy. The guy was built like a brick crap house, and his friends were all huge. They were the type of guys that didn't take too kindly to being challenged to a fight. We were 2 skinny 19-year-olds. Anyway, I bought Brick Crap House Guy a replacement drink and somehow talked him and his mates down from flattening the pair of us, then dragged my idiot friend out of the pub and got him home. Some people should moderate their drinking. By the way, the rule is you spill another man's pint, you immediately apologize and buy the next round. Actually, saw the guy again a few days later, small town, and he was cool about it. Private pilot story. Just on a return flight with a few mates back to Loco Aerodrome, I looked down at rudder pedals and noticed the side of my shoe was basically starting to melt. First moment of realization that the engine was indeed on fire. Ha! I'm in danger.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming up here on the beautiful sights of Washington. You can actually see the Space Needle if you take a look out to the left. Just don't look to the right because there's smoke coming from the engine and my foot is on fire. Please enjoy your stay, and thank you very much for flying with Western Airlines.
A retired cop my dad knows has a great story. I guess this was like the 70s or 80s. A pregnant woman spent the night at her mother's house while her husband was at a bachelor party. She comes home in the morning and sees the door is ajar, but she knows she locked it. She runs to the neighbors and calls the police. She calls the house where the guys were supposed to be, but no one answers because it's like 7 a.m. after a novel of hard drinking. My dad's friend and another officer shows up. They talk to the wife and decide to check the house out just in case. Since she was pregnant, she's going to wait at the neighbor's house. So they walk in and shout, "This is the police! If anyone is there, come out now!" Or something like that. Then they start checking rooms. Nothing in the living room, nothing in the hall. But then they get to the kitchen. There is broken glass on the floor and what they think must be blood. So they call for backup, and they keep looking. Nothing in the other bedroom, nothing in the washroom, bathroom. Finally, they get to the master bedroom and see clothes on the bed. And they can hear someone in the master bathroom. "This is the police! Come out now!" they shout. And nothing. Finally, they decide to go in full force. They open the door and run in, weapons hot. They see a man completely in his birthday suit, blood all over himself and the bathroom, passed out on the floor. The medicine cabinet is open and everything that was in it was on the floor in the sink. The guy in the birthday suit wrapped his foot in a towel and there was blood coming from it. Though they couldn't get him to talk, as he was unconscious, they called in for an ambulance. A few minutes later, the backup guys and the ambulance arrives and they start treating the guy. Then my dad's friend goes to tell the pregnant woman about the intoxicated guy in his birthday suit that broke into her house. She was horrified. Because he was passed out and had lost the blood, the medics take him to the hospital. The pregnant woman and the neighbors are all looking out the window as they wheel the guy out, covered in a blanket, handcuffed to the stretcher. She just loses it, is laughing and crying, potentially hysterics from being pregnant. By this time, one of the other cops was inside and he starts trying to calm her down. He's afraid she is going to go into premature labor. Finally, the neighbor explained that the guy they had arrested was the pregnant lady's husband. It turned out his buddies dropped him off about half an hour before his wife got home. He stripped down for a shower, then decided to get some water, shattered a glass, then stepped on it, then wrapped his foot in the dish towel and crawled to the bathroom where he tried to disinfect it, but instead spilled everything, got blood everywhere, and passed out. That must have been a hell of a bachelor party. A couple of days ago, I was working up a tree, arborist. The tree in question was a black locust that was dying at the top. However, the base looked fine. I set about slowly dismantling the tree, which was an awkward task because I couldn't get as high up onto the tree as I wanted due to the decay, and it was growing over a building, so I couldn't just let the bits free fall. After an hour or so of working, I heard a snap about a meter above me while I was about 13 meters up into the crown. I looked up to see a long branch above me that was growing into the crown of another tree had snapped. I realized instantly that this meant that the base of the tree I was in had failed, and I was going to go down with it if I didn't get out. Before I could even react, the tree was free falling down towards the outbuilding that I had been working so hard to avoid. Time slowed down, and I could see my colleagues standing in the woodland watching me with pure fear on their faces. After that, it's hard to put thoughts into words, but I remember looking down at where the tree was going to land and thinking that it's weird because this second I am completely lucid, but a second from not I will be probably unconscious, possibly never to regain consciousness. Yet I didn't feel any panic, just a knowing that I'm in extreme danger. All I could do was grab the nearest branch and plant my feet on another one and hope to God that I didn't end up under any part of the tree. After what seemed like forever, the tree came down onto the roof of the outbuilding. I had probably traveled 10 meters vertically and about the same laterally. The large limbs of the tree that were previously to my right, but were now above me, didn't snap and crush me like I was sure they would. I managed to hold onto my branch and stayed roughly in the middle of the tree. I was free from injury, other than a twisted ankle and a twinge in my wrist from holding on tight as the tree smashed down. I don't know how I didn't get seriously screwed up by that tree, and I don't know why it failed on me, but I will never forget that knowing that I'm in danger, falling with tons of wood, and there was nothing I could do about it. My third year fighting forest fires, I was upgraded to pump truck operator for a mop-up crew. After a section of the fire was deemed extinguished, they send in mop-up to make sure it's actually really out. I drove a giant pickup truck with a huge tank of soapy water and filled up portable water bags for the mop-up fighters. On my way back to base, I had a bit of water left when I saw plumes of white smoke. You're urged to extinguish all smoke because no one wants a dead fire to come back to life. There's a fallen tree next to a bunch of bushes and another half-fallen tree, and the half-fallen tree is spewing hot coals every couple seconds with a loud pop. Each pop of hot coals makes the other wood products take off. The fire was at risk of starting over again right here. I had nothing but a small ant bladder bag. I bounded down to the pump truck, grabbed a hose, ran it up, bounded down, turned the hose on, ran up, and began attacking the situation. As I'm chasing down the heat and fuel source, I realize I'm surrounded by flammable objects. Soon after, I'm surrounded by giant flames, alone. I was literally screaming and laughing as I hacked and sprayed away at the rising flames. I got it tamed down after soaking and chopping, killed the main source. I also sprayed the heck out of the branches so soapy water was dripping everywhere. I had just finished rolling the hose back up and was catching my breath when these Marines came running up the hill. They were sent to investigate the smoky mess I've been dealing with. Being high-fived by a Marine is a good feeling. I know you guys might hear this a lot in general, where people say like, hey, appreciate your firefighters, but seriously, appreciate the people doing this. Fighting fires is absolutely no joke. Incredibly grateful. It's something I know I personally could never do. When I was about 12, a friend from our local church drove me and his sons to go swimming at a creek near where we lived. I didn't know how to swim yet, but he assured me that I'd be fine since there wasn't much water and it could be a good learning experience. So far, pretty normal stuff. It gets weird though. The water was much deeper than expected and he did nothing to help on several occasions when I almost drowned. I was supposed to stay at his house overnight, but wasn't feeling very good after breathing in water a few times. Plus, something obviously didn't feel right. He was mumbling to himself while he put his shoes back on after swimming. Good thing I stayed home. Turns out he was off his medication. My family didn't know that he had previously terminated a person during a hunting trip when he was in his early teens. The night I decided to go home, he went off the rails. He believed that the world was going to end, so he tried to terminate his whole family. When my family went to church that Sunday, we didn't see his family. The pastor told us what happened. They had all miraculously survived, but he was now in lockup for his serious issues. Almost drowned, almost taken out, family friend was a murderer, and we didn't know it. Going home from a party in a shared Uber with some friends, I mistook the street for another one and ended up further away from my apartment than I thought. I put the GPS on, and of course it makes you take some back alley. At one, I saw some movement near a car, and there was a guy looking at me. I pass him, try to call my friend because he was looking weird. By the way, I did the wrong number and someone got a voicemail from me sounding totally terrified and spitting nonsense. I walk faster and look back. He is ducking behind another car and clearly switched from his original place, and he had a small knife in his hand. I bolted from there and ran as fast as possible with adrenaline and stopped after finding a busy street. But when I saw the knife, I definitely went, oh crap. I was on holiday and had left my hotel to walk to Livingstone National Park in Zimbabwe. My friends had visited earlier in the day and wanted to stay by the pool, so I figured I'd walk over by myself, since it wasn't a particularly long trip. The easiest route from my hotel was following a small path between some bushes and trees. I'd been down the path before, but this time, there were families of baboons walking down this path and no other person. I walked on anyway. figuring that as long as I wasn't waving food around or getting too close, I'd be fine. Apparently, I must have done the latter and unintentionally stepped too close to one of their young, because one of the full-grown adult baboons jumped out in front of me and started howling at me, baring its teeth. Because of the noise it was making, it attracted the attention of all the other baboons, and 2 other full-grown adults soon joined the first and howling and showing serious aggression, all of a couple of yards in front of me and to my side. I had no idea if there were more behind me, but my instinct in the situation was to hold up my hands to show empty palms, stand tall, broad, and start stepping backwards and away slowly. Thankfully, it worked. They eventually turned away and carried on, but for a short while, my mind was having flashes of being torn apart by 3 baboons. I later found out their bites can break human bones, so I'm pretty lucky that my instinct in the situation was the correct one. I arrived for work at a bank, stepped inside, and had a stranger say, "Happy April Fools," and put a revolver against my temple. 2 robbers, both with revolvers and rifles, had made their way inside before opening, and had bailed up the manager as he arrived and then the staff as they arrived. They were talking to a third accomplice on walkie-talkies. I was told to lie face down on the ground, arms on my back and legs together. One robber was going down the line, hog-tying staff with cable ties, while the other had a manager and supervisors unlocking safes. All along, there were threats not to look or move, or you would be shot. The robber had just tied my wrists together, with the pistol lying on the ground between my legs, when I heard a commotion. A staff member had managed to exit while they were distracted. The robbers followed him and left the bank quickly. They got nothing. All in all, I was there with 15 other staff for about 35 minutes. They were caught further down the track. These were career bank robbers who pulled off a number of robberies over a period of time before being caught. It was really like a movie, dressed in suits, dark glasses, gloves, black spray paint over the cameras. You open the time lock safe, you get ready to open safe deposit boxes, you do the night safe. They certainly had a plan. 6 months later, the same branch was hit by another group. I had since moved to another city, but that robbery, according to my colleagues who were in both, was way more terrifying. I was living with a man I'd known for a month. New York City be like that, and one day I left without saying anything to him. I was at McDonald's and he texted and asked if I was at Papa John's, which was across from McDonald's. Thought, oh, creepy. Then I got home and we had a conversation where he started talking about something I just texted my girlfriend about, and it was a topic we had never discussed before. Red flag. I'm in danger. All the times he seemed to be in the right place at the right time, had food for me when I hadn't eaten, hit me all at once. Found out, dude had spyware on my phone and was watching my every move. So 100% agree, this is extremely creepy and no one should be doing this. But with a weird, cute, twisted idea, what if, ironically, he actually just was really caring, but he had no idea how to properly give that kind of care? Hey, buddy, you had a good workout? I bet you did. That was some really good Pilates in there. I brought you some water and this really delicious Big Mac for that nice protein. You need your protein, Big Mac?
Yeah, thanks, buddy, but I didn't tell you I was going to go for a workout.
Oh, I know. I'm your Papa Bird, watching you wherever you go. Gotta have a Big Mac for a big man. I love you. Yeah. When I was 18 years old, I was living in my first apartment by myself. I had no roommates, and my parents had just moved. My downstairs neighbors were a group of 20-somethings who had lots of traffic. Constantly people coming and going, parties multiple times per week. Rarely saw the same people twice. One day, I noticed a blacked-out vehicle in one of the parking lots. I swear I saw a camera with a long lens through the heavily tinted windows, but I just kind of brushed it off. Maybe it's paranoia. Over the next 3 days, I see more and more surveillance. Vans, sedans, trucks, all of them mirror black and limo tint windows. They would sit there for 8 or so hours at a time, and another vehicle would rotate in and relieve the post. Then, quick as they came, they disappeared one day. Now I'm getting concerned. I have no idea what is going on, but someone is definitely watching my apartment building. 2 weeks after I saw the last surveillance vehicle, I go out on my balcony for a smoke. That's when I see the cops. Holy crap. So many freaking cops. They were stacked up, breaching style on the sides of the building adjacent to me. There were probably 24 uniformed officers. Suddenly they fan out, weapons drawn and hot, and aimed at my building. They take defensive positions and are yelling at each other. One of them motions at me aggressively to go inside. Then a file of 12 SWAT officers begin closing in on my building, walking right up the path. I'm crapping my pants now because I've got a half an ounce of herbs and alcohol in my house, and there's 40 cops outside. I go inside and hide everything as best I can and go to the window that faces outside so I can watch this crazy crap go down. The neighbors below me got raided. The SWAT team fired a launcher of some sort through their windows. I heard 5 loud pops followed by acrid smoke wafting through my vents. They forcefully entered the apartment and I heard so freaking many shots. One small caliber pop followed by a roar of larger weapons. Must have been 100 rounds. I threw myself on the floor of my apartment as I listened to the supersonic crack of rounds missing. It seemed to never stop. I guess the neighbors were major players in the illegal substance game, and one of them pulled their piece during the raid, so the SWAT team terminated all 3 of them. The apartment building was condemned, and I had to move back in with my parents. After the fact, I realized how lucky I was to not get shot on my balcony or struck by a stray round in my home. Sometimes I have flashbacks and nightmares to that moment. My face on the uncomfortably thick carpet, blue-gray smoke in the apartment, glass shattering, drywall cracking, rounds flying.
What's the biggest plot twist you've seen in real life? In primary school, we had a World War I memorial lesson, and we were asked if anyone had any relatives who fought at the time. My friend brought in a picture of his great-great-grandfather with his wife. A girl also brought in a picture of her great-great-grandfather with his wife. The teacher said they looked similar. She put them side by side and looked shocked. We gathered around and it was the same man who had kept his 2 wives a secret. Both had been married privately. My classmates were cousins and didn't know. Dude, a similar thing happened to me. I was going to school with a female classmate for years, and one year my family had a big reunion and she showed up. Turns out we were cousins and we actually started hanging out more at school. Met a dude at a local 24-hour fitness who was wearing a Shark Punch shirt. Since most people have no freaking clue about the band, I immediately decided I needed to talk to bro out with this dude about his particular taste in music, which was metal. We got to talking, find out he's a drummer, lives locally and wants to start jamming some evil stuff. We exchanged numbers and all that good stuff. Of course, however, actually meeting up with reliable musicians is something harder than it sounds, despite the enthusiasm. Around the same time, I was working security at a local bar, and I met this random cute girl who wasn't from the area, but was totally into me and wanted to hang out. We exchanged numbers and we started planning a meetup. When we finally did, we hit it off pretty well, but she had mentioned that she's still kind of dating around, but really liked me and hoped that I was okay with that. I was totally okay with that because I was doing the same thing. We hung out maybe another time or so, and then shortly after that she hit me with the "sorry, but I'm kind of dating this other guy for serious" line, and I said I totally understood and moved on. When Jim Guy and I finally managed to get together to jam, a friend of his was there to play bass with us. We got introduced, started talking about random stuff, when Jim Guy happened to mention to his buddy about this girl he was dating. He and I started sharing our similarities and preferences of people we've dated, and I asked him to see what she looked like. He's like, "Sorry dude, she doesn't have any social media or anything like that, but I have a video of her at some restaurant we went to a few weeks back." He shows me the video. "Ah man, she's cute. Yeah, I met her outside at some bar in LA. Dude, she really reminds me of this girl I was dating not too long ago. What's her name?" "Kim." "Wait, really? That's so weird. I was dating a girl named Kim too. What are the odds? Hold up. Does she have a Snapchat?" "Yeah, why?" At this moment, I started trying to find her on Snap. "Dude, what's her name on there?" My gym buddy's friend at this time starts looking at both of us. "Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap." "Kimbersleys." The friend starts dying of laughter at this point, and we both come to the realization that we are the same dudes she ended up leaving/staying with. But we still ended up jamming anyways. This was basically that episode of Friends where Joey and Ross date the same girl. Maybe this isn't that big, but here it goes. I'm a medic, and one morning we had a call for an older woman, in her 70s if I remember right. She was having cardiac issues, was in compensated shock from a very low heart rate. From the time we got to her home to the time we were in the ambulance, she had been getting worse. We paced her heart and she was doing good the rest of our whole ride to the hospital. About 16 hours later, we get called for a rollover car accident. Get there and we have one male in the vehicle, unresponsive. Vehicle is upside down off the road. We get him out and he's in very bad shape. He wasn't breathing, so we intubated him and off to the hospital we went. Almost at the hospital, which is 30 miles away, and he goes into traumatic cardiac arrest. He's dead when we get there. While we were on the way to the hospital, we found his wallet, since we didn't know who he was. We saw a badge and he was a retired police officer, and I remember from the morning our patient's husband was a retired police officer. He was on his way to see his wife. Unfortunately, he stopped by the bar first. While it wasn't my job, I went to the nurse to talk to the wife and let her know what happened. She thanked me for being there so much for her family that day. I had a similar experience to this one. We had an old couple in different wards in our hospital. I was treating the wife on my geriatric station. On one of my weekly night shifts, I responded to a CPR alarm to reanimate the husband. It didn't go successfully. I personally took my patient to see her husband for one last time. It was one of the most emotionally draining days of my residency. I have a coworker who we'll call Joe. Great guy who has an equally great wife. Over the years, and even prior to meeting Joe, multiple doctors told Nina she would be unable to get pregnant on her own due to problems with her ovaries and fallopian tubes. She and Joe decided that a child-free life was okay with them. So she and Joe got married and lived happily for 12 years. When they started out, they didn't have much, but as time passed, they progressed in their careers and made a nice living for themselves. Finally, they got to the point where they were comfortable enough to buy a sports car for themselves, something Joe always wanted to do. It was his first new off-the-lot car that he ever owned. Now, Joe and Nina were in their early 40s at the time and figured that they would just coast on into retirement. Well, about 6 months after they bought their brand new car, winter came. Nina got a case of the flu and just couldn't seem to shake it. She just felt run down and nauseous, just not herself. After about 3 weeks of this, she went to the doctor. The doctor asked if there was any possibility she could be pregnant. She laughed at him and said, "I've been married for 12 years now and haven't had so much as a scare of being pregnant. Multiple doctors said it's not going to happen for me, so there's no way." But her doctor said, "Humor me. Let me rule it out. Just do a urine test." Well, wanting to figure out what was actually wrong with her ASAP, Nina peed on the stick and you guessed it, pregnant. So in their 40s with 12 years of living just the two of them, they were expecting. After the initial shock wore off, they were actually pretty excited even though they had to sell the new sports car, since a two-seater wasn't really going to be working for them. A few months later, their son John came into the world the usual way, happy and a healthy baby. And still are today. John just finished his first year of high school, great kid and super smart too. You just never know what life's gonna throw at you. My sister's boyfriend decided he wanted to do more with his architecture skills, so he gave a 2 weeks notice and moved to Haiti to help rebuild after the earthquake. They stayed together. He would send her long emails with photos and stories of what they were doing. This went on for a couple of months. One offhanded tip from a coworker, and a week of digging later, it turns out that he never went to Haiti. He moved to Seattle to be with his fiancée and partner of 9 years. This same thing happened to the mother of my friend growing up. She was dating a guy for a few years and things were getting pretty serious. Then one day he goes on holiday to visit his parents in Argentina. She goes to meet him at the airport when he's due to come home and there's no sign of him for hours. So she calls him and he says he's contracted a serious illness in Argentina and he isn't well enough to fly back, and basically says that he doesn't have long to live. She panics and phones him every day to see how he is. He starts avoiding her calls, and after about a week of not responding, she thinks it's the worst and contacts the police, who trace his credit card use to London, where he lives. They find an address that it's linked to, and then she starts doing some digging. So she goes to the address only to find his wife and infant daughter, while he's away on a supposed business trip. They both bonded over what a complete a-hole he is, and both decided that they were better off without him and dramatically left him when he got back from his business trip. Pretty sure these two women are still friends. It's crazy that there are some people out there that can't even land partners in this world, but there are others that have like 5 secret families. The Matrix is really throwing around the stats in the create a player mode. It's 1991, I'm 19 and just signed the lease on my first solo apartment. I just got the first paycheck from my new job. I deposit that paycheck at the ATM. Another first, I'd always gone into the bank to do this. 2 weeks later, I get my bank statement in the mail and see with horror, I have only $1.87 in my account. Way wrong. I should have at least $200. I've been very careful with my spending. I'm freaked that I came within $2 of bouncing my first rent check. I'm literally reaching for the phone to call the bank when the phone rings. It's the police, asking if my ATM card was stolen. I check my wallet and the card is missing. My job at the theater pub came with cash tips, so I didn't use the card often. And I tell them that I was going to call them anyways because I was missing $200 from my account. Well, we've got your card and your $200, so just come down to the police station. That's what they tell me. I can't figure out how they have my card and the cash. It doesn't make sense. So I just drive down there. The detective says someone, let's call him Bob, pulled in to use the ATM and saw a man acting suspicious while he was using it, moving back and forth as if he was trying to dodge the cameras. Bob says that the man then left the ATM, got into a car, and drove away at high speeds as if he was fleeing. Bob then went to the ATM and put his card in, which popped out. Bob then withdrew $200 and another ATM card popped out. My card. Bob's card had popped out because the crook had left my card in the ATM before speeding away. Bob then realized that he had withdrawn money from my account and not his, so he brought my card and the cash to the police station and reported the attempted theft. The detectives give me the description of the crook. According to Bob, it was a man 5'7", brown hair and rounded gold-rimmed glasses. I say out loud, so about my height, my color hair, and glasses like mine, before realizing Bob was describing me. I've never deposited a check in an ATM before, so I was moving back and forth, following the instructions on the screen, filling out the envelope with my account number, punching the amount in, etc. I then forgot to take my card out and just left because I'm a freaking idiot. I drove away at high speeds because I was 19 and that's just how I drive. Worried the detective might be annoyed, I didn't tell him that I was the crook. I just thanked him and left with the money I stole from myself. Somewhere in a box in my closet, I still have the police report where I was both the victim and the perp. I'm curious about how the guy who returned everything to the police was able to withdraw the money. Wouldn't you need the same PIN number? Or did the OP just leave without closing out his account? Crazy stuff. I told this in another thread, but it's still hilarious to me. Guy I knew in my high school English class was talking about one winter day how he was late to school because someone hid his mailbox. His parents made him fix it up before he went to school. He missed his ride and had to walk instead, but the school staff was cool about it and they didn't punish him. A few minutes later, another girl came into the class and she was talking about how her morning sucked. She lost control going down a hill and hit someone's mailbox. She freaked out and drove off before anyone noticed and described a few details of the house. Mailbox guy puts 2 and 2 together and burst out, "You hit my mailbox!" He wasn't super mad about it and she turned beet red. It was hilarious how they both reacted at the time. We lived in Florida at the time, and my dad goes to the eye doctor because he's seeing double. In all other aspects, he's healthy. He explains his symptoms to the doctor. This was in the early 2000s. The doctor picks up a medical book on eye problems. He finds the kind of symptoms my dad is describing. The doctor shows him the book. In the book, there is a whole medical page explaining what he is experiencing and a picture of a kid from the 1960s. My dad looks at the picture and says, "Doc, that's me!" The doc says, "Yes, those are the symptoms you are showing." My dad says, "No, that's really me in the picture." It turns out my dad had this eye problem when he was a kid. It's so rare that they took his picture in Ohio in the 1960s and slapped him in a book of rare eye problems. He doesn't remember much about taking the picture, but he did manage to get a copy and take it home for himself. I dated a girl who lived in a city I had recently moved away from. On my birthday, I drove out there so we could be together and go out to dinner. The entire time we were at dinner, she was distant and constantly checking her phone / sending texts, etc. There was virtually no conversation, and her constant texting was uncharacteristic and started to give me the vibe that she was either cheating on me or was just not into the relationship anymore. When we finished eating, she asked if it was okay for me to stop by a mutual friend's house to pick up some substances. I reluctantly agreed, thinking it was a pretty selfish request considering considering it was my birthday, and I don't even do that stuff. As we were walking up the steps to my friend's apartment, I'm running through the different ways for me to break off this relationship until the door opens and I realize she had planned a big surprise party with a ton of my friends, many which she didn't even know. All of the texts and lack of attention that I had been attributing to the lack of interest in me turned out to be the exact opposite. She's actually a pretty beautiful person. I've totally been here before. Well, kind of. I totally understand the overthinking people's actions, but I've never had a surprise party before. Was on a flight from Paris to Boston. I had the aisle seat across from a little hall of bathrooms in the middle of the plane. At one point, a man from a few rows up goes into a bathroom and after a couple of minutes comes out and is just standing in the aisle. So it gets my attention. He keeps going in and coming back out looking up towards where he was sitting. I see a woman sitting next to his empty seat shake her head at him, but he doesn't give up. Finally, after 5 times of coming in and out, he finally gets the woman to come back there. The lights are out and most of the plane is sleeping. They start making out in the bathroom hallway before he goes into one and pulls her in with him. They are in there for quite a while and then he comes out and goes back to his seat and a few minutes later she comes out and does the same. They are really flirty in their seats and about an hour later repeat this. The man goes in and she joins him. They end up doing this 3 times throughout the flight. My husband, who is sitting next to me, has caught on to what they are doing as well, and we make a joke about how they must be newlyweds on their honeymoon. We get off the plane and the woman is standing there at her gate waiting and the man is nowhere in sight. As the people from the back of the plane get off, a completely different man goes up to her and gives her a kiss on the lips and asks her if she was able to get any sleep on the flight, and he calls her dear. They then walk off to the luggage area with their arms around each other. So apparently what we thought was this adventurous newlywed couple was actually a woman hooking up with her seatmate while her husband was sitting in the back of the plane. Maybe it's a thing they do, maybe they were swingers. I really hope so, because that's rank otherwise. My only thought while listening to this story was, how did they get away with it 3 times? I worked for a bank at their call center as a workforce admin. We had a supervisor with a higher than normal personal rotation. People would be doing okay, then suddenly their numbers would drop and quit. In one of those instances, the guy quitting made a big freaking scene, called him out, insulted him, and pushed him around and ended up being restrained by other coworkers. At the HR meeting, supervisor is going off on this guy, bringing up every single thing the guy did wrong. He was boasting a bit too about how he would fix all of this dude's mistakes. The entire time this guy sat silent, said nothing, just stared at whomever asked him something. When the HR rep asked if he had anything to add, he pulled out a tape recorder and just played recording after recording. Of what, you ask? Of the supervisor literally threatening this guy, harassing him, belittling him, and overall being a complete jerk. Apparently, this guy would target overperforming agents and make their working environment hell to protect his position. I'm told the supervisor simply stared at his feet and nodded when he was told he was fired. The agent, as I understand it, was also let go, but he was very well compensated. For a semester in high school, my English teacher set up this game where one student was a secret killer. Every couple of days, the killer would sneak a note into a classmate's locker, backpack, textbook, or whatever that says, "You've been killed." My best friend and I were trying harder than anyone else in the class to play detective on this, especially near the end of the semester. Near the end of the school year, there was still 6 students left alive. They took the last 6 students who were alive and brought them into the front of the class one at a time, so we could all debate if he or she was the killer or not, and the person could plead their case. The teacher brings up my friend and says, "Okay, tell us what happened." And my friend just starts explaining on how he had to be really sneaky on this. So there was a good 20 seconds where I just didn't understand what he was talking about. There wasn't any great reveal or drum roll. He just brought him in front of the class and started explaining how he killed everybody. I lost my mind pretty good. The other twist that I forgot to mention was that at week 2 or 3, he had went to a student that we didn't really talk too much and told him that he was the killer and that he needed him to kill John Deere 89. So he hands him a few of the notes, and from there on out, he had one guy on the inside helping him kill people. That's why he could kill so many people without being caught, because if someone got killed, I was with my friend so I could vouch for him. The teacher said that there was nothing in the rule book that said you couldn't get another person to help you kill people. It was a huge gamble because the other kid could have just said, "I caught the killer," and the game would have been over. I forgot to mention, if you guess who the killer is, nothing happens. You have to catch them in the act. So when there was only a few people left, everyone is yelling, "You're the killer! You're the killer!" and just pointing fingers back and forth. This teacher sounds awesome. I wish there was more teachers like this, because I had a teacher in high school that had us read Fight Club, and I thought that was so wild. I was always excited to go to his class. I graduated law and got engaged to a girl I had been with through university. We both applied to the same graduate program and ended up working in the same office in Canberra. 3 months before our wedding, I found out that she was cheating on me with a mutual boss, and I broke it off with her. Long story short, it got really ugly, and the two of us ended up in a very bitter court case over property. Canberra is a pretty small city, and the legal world is pretty bloody small there too. And everywhere I went, I bumped into my ex. It was beginning to seriously get me down. Her too, as it transpired. And I applied for an Australian government overseas development job in Tuvalu, a Pacific island with about 11,000 population. It's quite a prestigious job to get, with only 2 positions offered for a 2-year contract on a rotating basis. I was successful in the application and moved on island to start my posting, only to discover that my ex was the other successful applicant. I spent the next 2 years sharing a tiny office on a tiny island with the person that I quite honestly loathe more than anyone in the world. Wait, you left in 2006. I was the guy who replaced you on that program. Your story was told to me at the bar at the Funatui about 100 times in the first month that I was there. I can't believe that I'm now seeing this on Reddit. Holy freaking crap. Yep, that was me. I hid out in the Funatui Lagoon Hotel for about 5 nights a week. Small world. Dude, I can only imagine how it must feel to want to get away from somebody, get the opportunity to do so, and then end up trapped with them for 2 years. Was at a big art show with my wife and kid. They were 3 or 4 at the time. We were walking up to a doorway and I noticed a couple of huge unclothed statues. I mean, like, no big deal to me, but I was worried about what the kid was going to say because he's a bit of a loudmouth at the best of times. But I didn't need him yelling about private parts in the middle of a crowded art gallery. I realized that the worst thing to do would be to make any kind of scene about it. No covering eyes or anything, just subtly angling the stroller away from the statues and making big deals about the art things on the opposite side of the aisle. Then the inevitable happens. I remember it happening in slow motion. My kid's head turns towards the unclothed statues. Eyes widen, arm raises and finger points, and mouth slowly opens. "Dad, look at those statues! They're not wearing socks!"
What's your best "fire me, I freaking dare you" moment from work? Worked for a newspaper, editing and actually putting the paper together, arranging it all, placing stories and pictures where they need to be, titling, quoting, and sourcing everything. I was a one-man team and used an overly complicated system that I figured out how to use really effectively. They treated me like garbage, set impossible deadlines, and berated me for not meeting them. One day, the boss tells me to fully complete a paper by the end of the day. Gave me no warning. I had no articles from the journalists and no photos from photographers. It was my job to collect it all from everyone, and he wants me to do it in a single day? I told him no. If he wants it done, he has to give me more time. He tells me if I don't have it done by the end of the day, I'm fired. I tell him that this paper can't function without me. He tells me I need to take the day off and cool my temper, and that he'll do my job for me. I get a call an hour after I get home, and that he needs me to come in and do it, and I can have as much time as I need. Promptly quit on that rumphole. Forget your stinky newspaper. Worked a job where I was the only one who knew how to take apart, clean, fix, and put all the equipment back together and do the weekly and monthly maintenance. I had a boss tell me one day that I was doing a poor job and not doing enough and that anyone could do it. If I didn't step up, I would be fired, or else they had manuals for each piece of equipment. So that night, I took apart all the equipment, weekly and monthly stuff too, cleaned them, and then just left it apart for them to figure out that morning. Then I turned my phone off after getting home for the entire day, as I had the day off. When I turned it back on the next day, I saw that I had initially received angry texts ordering me to return and put everything back together. This lasted an hour. Then text saying I risked being fired, then text begging me to return, then more text trying to compromise with OT, then an apology, before nothing else for the rest of the day, other than that the head boss wanted to see me as soon as I came in the next day. came in the next day, and over half the stuff was still not put together, and what had been put together was put together haphazardly, and would need to be taken out again, then put back in correctly. Was immediately asked to be seen by my boss and their boss to explain myself the moment I was seen entering. Once in the office, I told them that if they weren't there to apologize, then just fire me, or drop it and let me put the stuff back together. They looked at each other and then told me that I could get back to work. Boss never called me lazy again. That's so crazy to me. So legitimately, this guy, your boss, was like, I can't believe it. You're just so lazy because no one else here knows how to put these machines back together. Why are you so lazy? As the kids say it, that's cap. When I was 17, I worked a summer holiday job at Pizza Hut. I had transferred to my hometown restaurant from my university town restaurant. I was there for 5 weeks and hadn't been paid yet. The jerkhead boss claimed it was because I gave him the wrong employee number. I hadn't. Anyway, after 5 weeks of no pay, I rang him on New Year's Eve, i.e. busiest night of the summer, and said I wasn't coming to work because I wasn't a volunteer and I wasn't going to work for free. He told me if I didn't go to work, I may as well not come back as I would be fired. I didn't go to work, and I had a fun New Year's instead. Then a few days later, I called the employment tribunal, I'm in New Zealand, and told them what had happened. They called my jerkhead boss. He then called me, offered me my job back, and was nice as a pie for the rest of the summer. I worked at an unspecified telecom a few years ago. I was a senior manager in charge of programming, third-level support, and production support. A business unit bullied through code changes, made by the business side through a side deal with a legacy programmer in the data center, circumventing my team, QA and production testing. That just had to get implemented immediately without going through any testing at all. I refused. The CIO overruled me. 72 hours later, phone activations had ground to a halt. Customers nationwide were screaming, and the CIO called phone conference after phone conference, demanding timelines for when I was going to get this crap fixed. He kept screaming to have members of my team to get on the phone and explain themselves to him. I refused. Finally, I snapped and told him that if he wanted me to fix his mistake, I would need to get off the freaking phone, go work with my teams, and the only reason they hadn't walked out yet was that I was keeping him off their bums. But we would all happily go together. 24 hours later, QA and my team had the cow crap cleaned up and fixed for a clean rollout. This was all to avoid a 24-hour delay for QA production testing. I wish I could say that was the only worst time. Husband was having his gallbladder taken out and was having complications before surgery. I needed to leave from work for about 2 hours, and my boss threw a fit, stating I couldn't leave. I told her I had 300 hours of sick time I can use for myself and my husband, and if she wanted to push, I'd take all of it at once, leaving no one but her to do my job. She said she'd fire me if I tried. I just looked at her and said, I have to go. I'll send you my doctor's note. I wasn't fired. I was actually awarded that year for job performance. I didn't take all 300 hours. I just threatened to since I was protected by FMLA. I only took the day off. I don't know if anyone else got that vibe when she said, I have to go, I'll send you my doctor's note. It was such a CSI moment, just, I have to go, I'll send you my doctor's note. Anyway, you tell them. You tell that boss. Yeah. Over the first year I worked there, I essentially took over most of the tasks in my department, which were previously held by other departments and was done badly because of it. This led to a massive increase in productivity. I then found out I was paid significantly less than what others were making and others in my position across the industry were making. So I go to my boss and tell them I had done all this work, increasing productivity, and I would like to discuss a raise. They said no. Okay. So I worked there for another year, asking for a raise every now and again until I was offered a job that paid double. It didn't start for a couple months, so I held on to that job until I was set to submit my 2 weeks. I asked for a raise again, thinking, what the hell, why not? My boss goes off, tells me I won't get a raise, and says some very colorful things about it. It culminated with her telling me, if you don't like your pay, maybe we should evaluate your future at this company. To which I replied, already have. I took another job and this was your last chance to offer me what I deserve. I quit and walked out of that office. Friends told me that my sudden departure caused a massive backup of work that ended with my manager being fired for it. Ah, c'est la vie. Do I love stories like that? Ah, that lady. What a jerk. Worked for Radio Shack and always butted heads with the district manager. He wanted me to use these ridiculous sales techniques that might work in a big city, but were really pushy. The year he became our DM, I won a contest for best salesman in the whole company out of about 14,000 employees, and I did it without being pushy and forcing stuff on people. He still tried to get me to use these ridiculous techniques each month when he would visit, but after I won the contest, I stopped sugarcoating it and would flat out tell him, that's stupid. I'm not going to do it that way. I was a summer teacher at one of those Korean SAT prep schools that hired U.S. college students for a summer, and then promptly worked them to death. Although I will admit, the pay was pretty good. We taught 8:30 a.m. through 5:30 p.m. with an hour lunch, but had homework to grade every evening, prep work, etc. Well, they were mainly focused on teaching English, but I was a math and physics major, so they had me teaching SAT math and college prep physics. No problem. Then they decided since I studied physics, I should also teach their chemistry class. I tried to tell them that I didn't know much chemistry, but they insisted. So I worked my backside off refreshing myself on all the stuff before I taught it, while still teaching another math and physics class. One day in the middle of this, I got legitimately sick. I called in the night before, per the rules, and told them I couldn't come in. I took one day off, sleeping in my apartment, and then dragged myself in the next day. When I show up, they pull me aside and say, so how do you plan on making up the time for the classes you've missed? Excuse me? Well, we didn't have anyone to teach your classes, so all the kids are behind now. You have to make up the time. We figured you could just extend your morning class an hour for the first week, aka teach over lunch, and your afternoon class could then start an hour early for the next week. Why didn't you have a sub teach my class? Then they messed up and said, we don't have a sub. Well then no, I'm not going to skip my lunch because of your guys' poor planning. We'll fire you, and then you won't get your plane ticket reimbursed, they replied. Go ahead. First, I followed the rules and gave you notice I was going to be out. Second, you just told me you don't have a sub for my classes. That means if I leave, you're going to lose all those students that I'm teaching. That will cost you a lot more than the plane ticket will cost me. This was about 5 to 6 years ago. I was the second in charge of our shipping department, making $11 an hour. The head of shipping had a mental breakdown, so I took over while he got help. About 3 weeks after he returned, the company released him because they didn't like him and I could do the job. When they told me they had released him, I asked if there was going to be interviews for the job, or was the job just mine since I was number 2. I was told they were looking, but I would have a chance to interview once that process started. Fast forward about 6 months, and I'm still doing this job that pays around $50,000 a year for $11 an hour. We had some issues with staff turnover and process changes because the warehouse manager thought he knew best and would listen. They then tell me that there wouldn't be a shipping manager, just a shipping lead, which would be an hourly position. I ask about a raise and get told my review is in 2 months, so just wait. I wait. 3 months. 4 months. Then one day, after a 14-hour night shift, I get a call from the WM telling me I have to come in right now. When I get there, he unloads on me for things that were beyond my control and mistakes other people made. We start yelling, and that's when I told him, I make $11 an hour doing this job ex-boss told me he got paid $50K a year to do. I don't need this crap. Give me a raise or I won't be back. I then went home and back to sleep. When I go back to work, I'm met by WM and Ops Manager. They appreciate the hard work I've been doing and are putting me on a salary starting at $45K since ex-boss was there longer. I negotiated up to $48K. I was working in a restaurant. Already knew I was sick, but our managers were rumpholes, and I knew if I called in, they'd be extremely upset. Showed up to work around 8, and by 9 a.m. I knew I wasn't going to last for the rest of the day. Managers still made me stay. Around 9:30, I was pre-bussing my tables, and just the sight of half-eaten food pushed me over the edge. I managed not to get sick and hold it until I got to the dishwashing area, but then upchucked in a trash can immediately after putting my plates down. A coworker saw me and vouched for me when I went to tell my manager I was leaving for the doctor. He said, "Even with the doctor's note, if you leave work today, you'll be fired." I said, "You have human waste in a kitchen trash can and haven't even done anything about it. It's on camera. I'm leaving." Showed up for work a few days later and didn't hear anything about it. Ended up quitting a few weeks later for a job at a couple considerably higher scale restaurants. I worked in a deli several years ago while I was a university student, and one time I caught bronchitis and a wicked eye infection at the same time. I tried calling a few people to see if we could trade shifts for the week. Nobody answered their phone, to no one's surprise. So I called my boss instead and told her what was going on. She replied back saying, my health is not her concern, and that if I'm not showing up, I need to find someone to cover. Just so I understand, I have an infection on top of having bronchitis. I am on antibiotics and can barely function properly, and you expect me to come in and operate slicing machinery because nobody wants to take my shift. Trying to articulate this without coughing was difficult, but I managed it. Correct. My body decided that now was the perfect time to have a coughing fit, which my boss heard through the phone, and that prompted her to say, you know what? Maybe you should stay home this week. I hated that place. It's not like we were ever understaffed. If anything, we were always overstaffed. But freak me if I tried trading shifts with someone else for health reasons. I've had to cancel appointments because of this crap. I got out a few months after the bronchitis incident. I was elbows deep in an AT&T Unix machine that should have been replaced a decade before, parts strewn all over a desk when the client came in to see what was taking me so long. You've got 3 dead fans, one of the power supplies has failed, there's a bad CMOS battery, and the video card is glitchy and refusing to allow the machine to post sometimes. So how long is that going to take? 15 minutes? I could patch things up in a couple of hours, but I'm going to have to come back in a few days with new parts. If you can't fix it in the next half hour, you're fired. I'll find someone that knows what they're doing. I stood up, grabbed my tools, and started walking. Where are you going? I told you how long it would take. That's longer than a half hour, so I guess I'm fired. My firing lasted about 3 more steps towards the door. 2004. Worked at a municipality department. One day the programmers update the work PCs and block pretty much everything and anything. No internet at all, no authorization for installing anything, all games removed from Windows. They even removed the calculator function for some reason. Then the supervisors started moving coworkers around and my entire team was dispersed across a gigantic building for no reason. We were the top team in terms of results. The supervisors simply hated our guts for some reason. So me and one of my coworkers tried to devise some way to have communication without having to travel for 5 minutes each time, across the building and down a floor, just to get to each other's desk and ask a simple yes or no question. We do this during our lunch break. Our supervisor interrupts and asks what we're doing. We explain we're trying to save time and maximize communication and results. The supervisor, who doesn't like us anyway, says we should get back to work and quit trying to communicate through unauthorized means. Okay, we simply stopped trying to install Messenger on our phones. One day later, the supervisor is looking for my coworker. I don't know where he is. I say so. Well, then contact him through your messenger program. The one you told us to quit installing? Yes. We gave up on that. On your orders. She tried to get me fired for refusing to obey basic orders. I explained the situation to her superior. He let me get back to work and told me to ignore her from then on. I moved to a better post a few months later because she made my life unbearable from that day on. And I finally went and told the upper floor they'll either move me elsewhere or I quit. As I was studying in Paris, I also worked night shifts in a hotel near the Hôtel de Ville district. I worked from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. several nights in a row. The hotel was very busy as it was a very touristic area, so getting 4 hours of sleep over the total 4 to 5 nights was usual. It happened several times a week that the hotel manager simply forgot to relieve me in the morning, so I'd be falling asleep on the counter as they came 2 or 3 hours late. When I politely remarked that I'm tired and they're late again, he'd simply laugh it off and say, I guess we forgot about you. Finally, I decided to pass a job interview for some other work that essentially happened during the day, so I'd finally sleep my nights. When I found out that they accepted me in that new job, I waited until my shift should have started that Friday evening and phoned that manager waiting for me to relieve him at the desk. Oh, hello, I just called to say that I got a new job from next Monday, so I'm not coming tonight, nor ever. What do you... But you cannot! Why didn't you say something sooner? I guess I forgot about you. I used to work at a small family-owned grocery store for a few years. We got our load in on Mondays and Thursdays, and we got passed over one Monday, and the distributor said we'd get the missing load in on Thursday. So what essentially happened was a double load, and my 2 receiving partners were out sick. I was the only person in the warehouse receiving at the time and got to take on 15 plus pallets of groceries that needed to hit the shelves immediately. I was specifically told to not go up front and to do what I could while the front end crew covered the aisles and cash registers. Well, a lot of them were either lazy, untrained, or just putting in their hours so they could pay bills. I put in my earbud, just one, and get to work. I'm halfway through checking the pallets when I get called up front. So I ignore it and continue. Then I get called in again. So I head up there and get yelled at by a new hire with a bad attitude to do your job and bag for me. The customer was a regular and we got along very well. And she told me that she was fine and could bag her own groceries. Between the customer and the fact that I wasn't having it, I walked away. I had 3 years and 2 ranks on her. So I didn't give half a crap and went back to my pallets. Then I get the newest hotshot manager who replaced the old hotshot manager who replaced the beloved manager who trained basically the whole store, in my face about having an earbud in on the clock, which is allowed as long as you have one ear free, and said I could be sent home and not come back if I wanted to listen to music. So I gestured to the pallets and said, go for it. These all need to be checked in and broken down. Have fun. I got to keep my earbud in. So I had that going for me, which was nice.
What is something that happened at a sleepover which you'll never forget? My friend got an inappropriate text from his mom that was meant for her boyfriend. It specifically said the boyfriend's name in it, so I'm certain it wasn't anything weird. The look on his face and the graphic detail in the text was the funniest freaking thing I've ever witnessed. I couldn't fall asleep because I was laughing for hours. It's always fun to get those types of texts from people, but never when it's your mom. I feel bad for this person. We were all around 8 to 10 years old, and it's about 11 p.m. after spending all day with the birthday boy's aunt, his legal guardian. We were watching Wild Wild West when out of nowhere, one of the boys says to my friend's aunt, "You have great knockers." She said thank you, and we all continued watching the movie. That kid went on to be a Giga Chad. First time I ever saw spicy content was at a sleepover, and it totally blew my mind. I had no idea that there was a whole world of spicy possibilities beyond awkwardly touching my pillow. Hey now, the anime body pillow business is booming. This may have happened to a friend of mine. I was the first one in the group to get a computer in our bedrooms. I became, an expert in surfing the internet. Well, one night, Chris came over and I showed him LimeWire. To this day, he swears he went to bed, but when I went to sleep, he was watching, and when I woke up, he was watching. With his bloodshot eyes, he left my house, not as a boy, but as a man. A man who probably spanked the monkey on my computer chair. Gross. LimeWire, the website where you always downloaded the wrong version of the show you wanted. When I was about 7 years old, my friend and I stayed up pretty late watching TV. We came across some weird infomercial channel that was advertising body paint. All of a sudden, unclothed women pop up on the screen and these men started rubbing green paint all over their bodies. It then cut to an unclothed man that was wrapped in a plastic blanket that had the air sucked out of it. The women threw themselves on top of him and started rubbing their bodies on him. I got so paranoid that my friend's mom would walk in from the next room, but my friend was so intrigued by whatever the hell was that, and she dismissed all my pleas. I still have no idea what the heck we were watching. You were watching Real Hooking Up on HBO. That was the episode about people that like latex. Dude, watching something on late night HBO was my first experience too. I just remember it being a hot Asian woman and I was like, wow! I was around 7 years old. I had a rich friend named Kevin who could afford all sorts of cool toys because his dad imported and exported them, along with a bunch of other goods. During one sleepover, he brought over one of these remote control fart boxes. Instead of playing with it, we hatched a master plan to sneak it under my parents' bed and unleash its power when they were going to bed. We waited for hours. Finally, when the clock struck midnight, we let it loose. God damn it, Alan, my mother said. But it wasn't over. We didn't spam it. We waited for them to settle and let it go again and again. Finally, we couldn't take it anymore. My parents had us cracking up, and my dad, as boisterous with his cologne as he is, realized it wasn't his butt. I used to be best friends with a popular girl at school, and our group of friends had sleepovers all the time. One night when we were 12 years old, I woke up all wet and she convinced me that it was really hot and we had just sweated all night. Then I started to think about the plastic cover on her bed and the frequent sheet changes, and it all made sense. She had peed the bed, and well, me too. Okay, not a sleepover technically, but more of a trip. My class went to a trip away and the boys slept in one room and the girls in another. Now, on one of the last days of this week-long trip, one of the boys in my class decided it would be a great idea for all of us to play together at the same time. So a group of 17 boys playing furiously in their sleeping bags was one of the most what the freak am I doing moments in my life, and that is a moment that I'll never forget. Also, at a school ski trip one year, there would be speed playing basically every evening of the week. I still don't know how we came up with this idea that finishing fast was the goal to aim for, or if it was really necessary to show the tissue as proof. But well, at least we had separate beds this time. In hindsight, the whole thing did feel less awkward than it probably should have. Bro, what? At our school, there was a big bunch of us guys. Not exactly all friends, but good friends who had other friends that hung out with them. An extended circle of about 40 mates. One guy, Stuart, was a bit dim. Not amazingly so, just slightly lower than average. He wasn't actually my friend, but we'd talk, played football, and walked home together, but never went out of the way to hang out. Anyways, whilst waiting someplace, we were talking and he told me that there was a game that a few guys played, Soggy Biscuit. The aim was to put a soggy biscuit on a post. After someone calls the start, they'd get their members out, and well, you know, the last one to finish had to eat the soggy biscuit. He then asked if I wanted to go and do it. I said no. Many years later, I'm in a pub and there is Stu, when we start talking and having a few drinks. After a few pints, I asked him if he had any soggy biscuits lately and we had a laugh. He thanked me for not telling others about it and not dropping him as a mate. He then tells me, I loved playing Soggy Biscuit. Most of the time, I used to lose just so I could eat it. Then he says, I used to kick up a fuss about eating it. Later on, I'd refuse to eat it and the others would hold me down and force the biscuit into my mouth. I asked you to join us because I wanted your Soggy Biscuit, and I still do. Here's my number. He then shaked my hand and left. I never called him, but I do wonder if anyone of the extended group joined him. Stu had no chill, and I actually got some more information about him. He got married to a girl, had a baby with her, got caught cheating with a man, and she kicked him out. Months later, she had the kid, but he wasn't allowed to see it. She lives in a terraced house, long row of attached houses with no front garden. He drives by the house to try to look into the windows to see the baby, sees it, gets excited, floors his flatbed truck and crashes into 3 parked cars, gets out and runs off. One of those cars belonged to a mutual friend's brother, who sees him running off and calls the cops. He ends up getting banned from driving, but does start to be able to see his kid. And they got back together. Okay, I thought the previous story was bad, but again, bro, what? Also, where was the sleepover? When I was 7 years old, me and my best friend had heard gunshots outside of his house late one night. It wasn't a completely unusual occurrence, so we didn't think much of it until we went outside the morning after and found his dog had been hit by one of the bullets. Family friends moved to a farm in rural Wisconsin because they thought living on a farm would be fun. The high school kids would drive around the county getting wasted and shooting people's dogs. Because, you know, country folk are normal people. Luckily, their dog only had their leg blown off. When they were finally caught, they had killed over 25 dogs and injured a bunch more. That's some psychopathic stuff right there. You think that's weird? When I was in the 8th grade, a new kid joined in the middle of the year. He was all kinds of awkward. He liked to wear pink shirts and talk about dissecting animals. Someone called him on his apparent BS and found out that he had been catching birds and squirrels to mess with. They straight up told the school on him, so they searched his house and found a crap ton of dead animals, including birds wrapped in duct tape, that were still alive when he did it. I just don't get how messed up people can get. I used to light popsicle sticks on fire and drop them in the tub. Real tough kid I was. Okay, well, I just want to say I hope those country kids got shown the country justice after hurting those dogs. As for that last kid, I'm pretty sure that's how the show Dexter started off. The serial killer, not the laboratory. When I was a kid, my mom had a friend who would always bring her son over to hang out. Anyways, they arranged a sleepover for us that he was especially stoked about. So when it's lights out, he almost immediately starts crying. He kept saying my mom wanted a girl over and over. I'm still not sure what the hell happened. Staying the night at a friend's house with a bunch of our buddies, when we were all in our mid-teens. We're all sleeping on the floor in this large room, fairly spaced apart, almost zero light. The slightly older sister of a friend whose house it was had been flirting with one of the guys all night, and while we were asleep, she snuck into the room. I think I was the only one still awake. From what I could make out in the darkness, she crawled over to the guy she had been flirting with, slid under his blankets, and got on top of him and started doing stuff. He had the biggest grin on his face the next morning and would answer, "I'm just happy to be here with you guys," whenever asked. I was in preschool and was sleeping at a friend's house down the street with my sister. In the middle of the night, I woke up to screaming and glass shattering, so I got out of bed and followed the noise into the lounge room. His parents were screaming at each other, and when they saw me, the mother came running over and pushed me into the bedroom and shut the door. Not something I'll forget anytime soon. A friend's mom and her fella started doing the deed when they thought everyone was asleep. I wasn't. His mom thought she was being quiet. She wasn't, and being a 14-year-old boy, I could not help but, do the needful thing. Dude, I was over at my friend's for a sleepover one time when I was like 11, and his parents just started going at it in the bedroom next door. It's like 7 p.m., and they have like 6 kids, and they're all awake. My friend just looks at me and casually says, "Mom, please," and then goes back to playing video games. I actually had a similar moment when I had to apartment sit for my brother one time, and his neighbor was definitely having a good night from what I could hear. She sounded kind of hot too. When I was younger, I spent the night at a friend's house for her birthday. All the other girls were asleep, but I couldn't sleep. I was bored, so I went to the bathroom and started playing with her mom's makeup and hair care products. What's the worst that could happen, right? Well, I got a chunk of my coarse, curly hair stuck in a hairbrush. I could not for the life of me get it out. I was too afraid to go rummaging around in the kitchen for scissors because I didn't want to wake up the other girls. So I tried pulling really hard and ripped out my hair. A full chunk of hair about 3 inches wide. I pulled it all out, crying silently the whole time, and then spent the rest of the night picking my hair out of the hairbrush with blood rolling down my forehead. It was traumatic. My conclusion? Sleepovers are dangerous. Once I had a friend over and he puked what looked like a gallon of mashed potatoes in my bed and blamed it on my 15-pound dog who was locked up in his kennel. Stupid Brad. I was about 8 or 9 years old at my mate's house watching The Exorcist. My mate's dad thought it would be funny to go outside and lift the window shutter and scream through the window. It was freaking terrifying. I wet the bed at a friend's house one time. The next morning, I told him that I grabbed some lemonade from the fridge in the middle of the night and spilled the whole cup. I was like 8, and they didn't have lemonade. Another kid and I got into the same sleeping bag and touched our things together because we thought it would mean that we lost our virginities. The other boys sat in a circle around us, egging us on. It was actually a lot like the last scene of Requiem for a Dream. Damn, I forgot about that movie. And that last scene was pretty crazy. New Year's Eve 99 to 2000. I was about 12. I woke up with a sleeping bag full of pee and my hand in a bowl of water. Until the end of the year, they made fun of me for not being Y2K compliant. I had a big birthday party sleepover when I was 11 or 12 and invited a bunch of my friends to spend the night. My mom made me invite the kid from down the road who was in my grade and never really got noticed. He was really small and took a lot of medicine. Anyways, he wet the bed that night and was humiliated by everyone there, including me. I saw him on the bus the following week and felt bad about what happened, and we hung out most weekends until the end of high school. He told me that he had a liver transplant in kindergarten and was facing some serious health threats in the future. And last summer his liver failed and he passed away in hospice care at the age of 25. We lost touch after high school, which is what happened with most of my old friends. He messaged me on Facebook this time last year, wanting to catch up. We chatted for a bit and I told him that I would visit him the next time I was in town. He didn't say anything about his failing health, and I wish he had. I would have made a special trip back home to see him. It's been a year and I've been thinking about him more than usual lately. I miss him a lot. Man, that was a tough read. I always look back on those awkward friends or classmates that I had in high school and wondered if they had any medical or mental health issues. Not something you think about when you're young. Not particularly eventful or spicy, but when I was in middle school, my friend had a birthday sleepover with about 8 or 10 girls. Around 10 p.m., we decided to all sneak out and go TP some boy's house. We go and TP the house. Then we realize we are lost, and we don't know how to get back to her house. So we find the closest main road and just start walking down it. About 8 to 10 middle school girls in their PJs. So naturally, a police officer stopped us and asked what we were doing up so late. Must have been a really awesome cop because we make up some stupid story about looking for a lost cat. We all pile into the car and he takes us back to her house, where we ask him to turn off the lights and let us walk up. This is a true story, but you probably won't believe it is. I was staying the night at a friend's house when I was 8 years old. My foster brother was there too. My friend asks if we want to see a cool trick. We say yes. He lays down on the floor, pulls his pants down and lifts his feet up to his face. He's wearing tighty whities, but what happens next is so crystal clear in my memory. He farts and a small black spot about the size of a dime begins to darken by his butt. Then it gets darker and a hole appears before my eyes. He burnt a hole through his underwear with his fart. See, I told you wouldn't believe me. I didn't believe it either. We told him to do it again, and he did. This time I watched very closely, and after a minute of him getting a fart ready, he lets loose the same quiet fart with the short and the fresh pair of briefs began to darken. My foster brother and I are standing by, watching this feat with scientific scrutiny. The dime-sized spot goes darker and darker, but it doesn't look wet. There's no flame, though it looked like I was watching something burn in the sun. You know how sunlight makes flames nearly invisible? That's how this fart looked by the light of the bedroom lamp. So then the hole forms and all of this takes place in just 4 or 5 seconds. There is a little smoke, though I may have imagined it. The smell is like a fart plus hot rubber. My foster brother and I deliberated and requested a third demonstration. He says he shouldn't because his mom gets mad when he burns holes in his underwear. It's not aliens or ghosts or Bigfoot. It's a young boy with the ability to burn a hole through his cotton underwear with his flatulence. And I swear to God that it's true. Another odd thing was that his brother came in an hour earlier and offered us toothpaste. When we declined, he shrugged and ate a third of the tube in one squeeze. I'm sure I already said this a bunch this video, but bro, what? This one time, my high school friend jumped from a third floor and fell into a coma. We were having a guys' night, getting wasted, everything was normal. My friend and his cousin decided to light up some herb. My phone rang, and it was my friend's mom. She wanted to talk to him since his phone was out of battery. He was sitting on the couch and I was heading towards him with my phone in my hand. When he saw me heading for him, he freaked the freak out like he saw some kind of demon or monster or something, and ran to the balcony and just jumped. He hit his head on a tree going down and fell into a coma and was out for 2 years and a bit. He ended up waking up one day like everything was normal, but he ended up dying a few hours later due to organ failure. His parents blame me since they believe I was the one that handed him the stuff and all that, and that I was the one to blame for inducing the fear that made him jump. My conscience is clear, but what I had to go through to not be seen as responsible, police, family, his and mine, friends and colleagues, was hell. Damn, that's a crazy story, but am I the only person who had a childhood that didn't involve getting wasted? My best friend was a very tomboyish girl, and one time when I was younger, I was sleeping over at her house. This time, 2 of her attractive female cousins happened to be there for the evening as well. I forgot how it came up, but they started talking about how they had never seen a peepee, and were asking me to show them. Now, I was a very shy kid and raised by very conservative parents, so this took a little persuading. But after an hour of them asking, we went into her bathroom, shut the door, and I whipped it out. Man, this is definitely one of those Dear Penthouse stories. When we were about 15, my buddy stole some drinks from his parents and invited me over to drink it with him. When I got there, I had to take a crap, and was only gone about 5 minutes, and when I came back, he had drank almost everything. I called him a butthole and drank what was left, which actually got me a little buzz. We decided to watch a movie and I noticed he wasn't looking good. He then puked all over the floor. His mom was downstairs and I didn't want to get caught, so I started cleaning it up. But then he just kept puking, like 3 more piles. I got him to the bathroom and he looked at me and said, "Guess what?" I said what, and then he started peeing his pants and laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. I got him back to his bed and he barfed again. This was like the 4th or 5th pile. I had only gotten 1 cleaned up so far. And not cleaned up very well, I was kinda wasted. He got out of bed and took his pee-soaked pants and underwear off and was looking for new pants. And that's when I decided I had enough. I wasn't going to deal with the barf and a naked person who was going to do nothing to help the situation. On my way out the door, I told his mom that he wasn't feeling well and left. When I got home, my parents knew that I was wasted and grounded me. His mom blamed everything on me and called my parents to tell them that I got her little angel wasted. Any parents that unironically refer to their kid as a little angel is usually a bad parent from my experience. Slept at a friend's house. Friend had a cat. Woke up with the cat sleeping on my face. I panic. Cat panics because I'm panicking. Cat claws my face. I have hated cats ever since. Screw head sleeping cats. I went to visit my aunt in Cali one year, and well, I crashed out on the futon. Come to find out, said futon was normally the cat's bed. At first, I flattened it out to a normal bed, but I kept waking up with this gigantic fat cat sleeping on me, or snuggled up so close I couldn't help but wake up. So I think, screw this time I just leave it on the couch. Had the weirdest dream I couldn't breathe and woke up in a panic to a 19-pound cat sleeping on my damn head. Well, this is just another reason for me not to like cats.
Teachers of Reddit, have you ever had a crush on a student? And if so, how did you feel about yourself? I used to teach entry-level programming at an art school to undergrads, and later at the graduate level. It happened all the freaking time, but I never felt bad about it, because they were adults and I was the same age. Obviously, I couldn't act on anything as a matter of policy, and I certainly didn't let it affect my grading, but god dang it was difficult, especially with the 2 instances where I could tell it was mutual. Or maybe it wasn't and they just wanted better grades, I don't know. They both got C's regardless. Edit. I get it. D jokes. My dad was my mom's professor in university. They got married. The marriage didn't go well. I am the result of what happens when people try to save a relationship by having a baby. College professor here. I get a lot of gorgeous students, but the attraction usually lasts as long as it takes them to open their mouths. What can I say? When you're in your 30s, 18 to 22-year-olds suddenly seem very shallow and immature to you. Trust me, you will come to think the same way. But then, I had a student who was not only stunningly beautiful, but also very mature beyond her years, and she had a lot of similar interests to me. And what's better, because she was new to America from England, she was also a bit lost and confused, and I told her she could come to me whenever she wanted if she needed advice and guidance. She did for a while, but I never did anything but just talk with her. As attracted as I was to her, trying to make a move would have been a very tricky thing because student-teacher relationships are very taboo. The thing is, though, as she adjusted to America, she started coming by less often because she didn't really need our talks anymore. After the class was over, I hardly ever ran into her anymore, so the opportunity just never presented itself. I look back on it now as a for the best thing. Even if she had been interested in me, and I don't think she was, I'm quite used to my students, even the more mature ones, automatically seeing me as an old geezer, even though I'm 31 now and this was a couple years ago. If I'd had a relationship with her and we'd been caught, it could have potentially been the end of my career, or at the very least it would have gotten me in a lot of hot water. But I also found that shortly after the class ended and I stopped seeing her with any frequency, that she fell out of my thoughts too, and I went back to being interested in women my own age who are preferably not my students. I'm actually glad that it doesn't bother me anymore because I feel like it would be beyond pathetic for someone like me to be so hopelessly in love with a student. I'm 22 and have a senior, so I'd assume 17 or 18, piano student who I most certainly don't have romantic or sexual feelings for. Honestly, the student-teacher barrier comes pretty naturally to me. But I remember after her first lesson being very intrigued/stricken by the fact that she reminds me so much of myself as a high school senior. Same sort of aspirations and motivation, or rather lack thereof for anything that isn't music, that I had at her age. Same sort of unusual taste in music, same dry and sarcastic sense of humor. She's even got a lot of the same weaknesses that I did before going to conservatory, most notably scales, sight reading, and jazz voicings. I don't like her, but I'm fairly certain that high school me would have been all over her. Not me personally, but had a guy that graduated my year 2012, secretly dating our student teacher for AP English in 12th grade. Not a huge thing, she was 4 years older. They started dating 2 weeks into the school year that year, and he got her pregnant. They got married last June. It was a very weird situation for all of us that knew, as she was very open with the girls in the class when our main teacher was out for a few days. Once had a very attractive student teacher in my senior year. She was 24, I was 18. A ton of the other students were talking about how bad they wanted to screw her. I became pretty good friends with her. We read similar books, listened to similar music, and one day she asked me for a ride home because her car wasn't working. I drove her to her house and she invited me inside. After talking for about an hour, we went into the bedroom and screwed. We kept it secret from everybody, and after I graduated, we began a stable relationship. We dated for about 2 years until she moved to Washington. I would say she had a crush on me. I teach kindergarten, voice actors note, bear with me here, so I don't exactly get crushes on my students. But as a person that doesn't want any kids themselves, there are a few kids, maybe 1 in 40, where I can't help myself from thinking I'd adopt the crap out of you if you didn't have any parents. It takes a special kid to bring out my paternal instinct. I would bang the majority of the moms though. I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of influence you have as a young, in your 20s, and successful teacher over high school age kids. I don't know how to say this, but you kind of get a free in as the young teacher because they can't relate to the more veteran teachers. The kids see a somewhat idealized version of you, and if you wanted to, it is quite easy to take advantage of that trust. This is why teacher-student relationships are avoided by teachers, because it's hard to tell what's real and what is a byproduct of that special mentor relationship. If you think your student is the one or something, just keep in touch and hit them up when they're an adult, mentally, not when they hit 18 and graduate. I was a teacher's assistant for a drawing class for a couple of semesters. It was the sort of TA position where the professor would hand you the outline for the semester and you'd teach one of his classes. There was this one girl that looked like a sort of Persian goddess, and she was freaking talented, which drew me to her even more. We got to the part of the class where we started doing portraits. I'd take volunteers from the class and we'd all draw them. I would bounce between critiquing students' work and doing the portrait myself because observing is a great way to learn. The first few went very well. I was on my teaching game and my portraits were up to my standards. Being a good sport, I'd give it to the model when they were done. The first one asked for theirs, and it just sort of became a thing. Then she came up. The thing about drawing is, you have to be able to ignore your brain's preconceived ideas of what you're looking at and dissect the visual information analytically. I found her so beautiful for the first time in my life, I could not do this. I drew, I erased, I drew, I erased. I wasn't bouncing around as much as I had been because I was so frustrated that I could not draw the one person in the class I wanted to draw. We finished, and it turned out okay. Not great, just okay. I still gave it to her, but I was honestly ashamed of it. At the end of the last portrait class, one of the models asked how they'd done. This led to a discussion on how they'd all done. Persian Goddess asked me the inevitable question. I told her she was difficult to draw. She asked why. I immediately regretted my initial response. I think I said something about her features being unusual or something cringeworthy. I wanted to tell her she was too beautiful, but I couldn't. If you're reading this, Persian Goddess, I'm sorry. I should have told you that you were gorgeous. This may not exactly count, but some years ago, I taught English in Japan. I'm a woman, and I taught an older female student at her house. Sorry, Reddit, no going where you think. She was quite nice, and one day she asked me to teach a lesson for her son, who was in high school. I agreed. I just came at the usual time and did the lesson with him instead of her. Well, he was a senior in high school. I was in my late 20s, and I thought he was adorable. I don't really feel guilty. My thoughts didn't even begin to approach the sexual side of a crush. I just thought he was cute and sweet, but he definitely had a bit of a crush on me, and our mutual appreciation was probably noticed by the mom. So here is where it gets hilarious. Next week, I come to teach the mom again, and we do the usual introductory conversation at the beginning of the lesson. It was during the rainy season, so I said to her that I missed the sun. She looked very confused for a minute, so I pointed up towards the sky to try and mime what I was talking about. We were in the first floor of her house, and I'm pretty sure I was pointing upstairs to her son's room, so she continued to misinterpret my English. It took me a minute to realize why she had this upset look on her face, and I don't think I was able to save her from her thoughts. After that day, she canceled the class, and I never saw either of them again. As this is not a throwaway, let me restate that I never crossed any lines with their son, even in the privacy of my mind, so I don't really feel bad about the whole thing, but I thought my story might amuse Reddit. Imagine having your relationship be over the intricacies of the English language. And I can only feel bad for the older female student because she couldn't exactly ask her if she meant the giant flaming ball in the sky or her progeny just chilling on the floor right above them. I taught a large lecture class at university level for a number of years. My department head clearly stated that hanky-panky with students was a fireable offense. There were opportunities, but I did not pursue. One situation, though not directly pertinent, stands out. When lecturing, I paid close attention to student reactions. In larger classes, I tended to settle on certain students for my repeated sampling. If they seemed to understand what I was talking about, things were okay. During one lecture on some fairly complex ideas, I had included, among other students, one beautiful co-ed. Until that day, I knew she was beautiful and appreciated her for that, but nothing more. Each time I spot checked, she was paying rapt attention, eyes wide, full of excitement at the knowledge I was dispensing. I was falling in love during my lecture. Such beauty, and she was enthralled with the topic that I totally loved. I required students to do a journal at the end of each class. She obviously had no clue as to what I was talking about. I was deeply puzzled. She had been right there at every point. Later in the semester, I went to a men's basketball game. She was a cheerleader, and one of the prime ones at that. Even while our team was being embarrassed by the visitors, the cheerleaders kept doing their job as if the fans' excitement would make a difference in this lost cause. And she was one of their leaders, eyes wide, showing the same excitement and verve that I had interpreted as her interest in my lecture. I learned a life lesson that day. As someone who has trouble understanding social cues and facial expressions sometimes, I can definitely relate to this. It's hard to know if somebody's face is just being naturally expressive or if they're showing a genuine interest in you. Back in 8th grade, I had this young, super attractive teacher for history. Don't know how old she was, but she had only been teaching for 1 year and was recently married, so my guess was 23 to 24. Anyway, one day I go to her desk to ask her something, and she was standing and leans forward to show me in the book what I need to read/look at. Well, I missed everything she was saying because holy heck, I could see right down her shirt and those knockers had 8th grade me captured. I was totally zoned out just looking and looking. At some point she stopped talking and noticed what I was doing and just smiled and was looking at me, never stood up or covered up. Our eyes met and she just smiled, winked, and then sent me on my way. The rest of the year was kind of flirty, but she never tried anything. Fast forward 12 to 13 years, and one day randomly on Facebook, I get a friend request from her. Haven't spoke to her since I left the 8th grade. No idea why she added me. Thought, well, maybe she adds all the kids she taught. Well, despite my graduating class having over 1,000 kids, we had no mutual friends. So I waited a while to accept it and then eventually did. Still no friends that were in my grade. Finally, I got creeped out and deleted her. Still have no idea why she did that. Makes me wonder if there was something more behind that. I'm gonna be honest, that dude dodged a bullet. If your teacher's trying to start something with you in 8th grade, that's a red flag right there. I'm surprised nobody got called. I work at an expensive school that teaches 4 to 7-year-olds. A few of my students have moms with husbands that work 80-hour weeks and become very interested in me. One in particular sent her daughter to school with skincare products. Cool? Chocolates, and wine on different occasions. She kept trying to hang out with me outside of school and wanting pictures of me and her daughter together. When she finally got the message that it wasn't happening, she pulled her daughter out of my class and had her quit the school. It was weird. When I was teaching high school level students, it was the reverse. A student had a crush on me. It made things awkward because a few others sensed it. Thankfully, by being consistent and not returning any signs of interest over time, it eventually cooled down and resolved. What's interesting, though, is that most think it's always the teacher having feelings for a student, when sometimes it's the opposite, and it places the teacher in a very uncomfortable, difficult position. If you ask me, it comes down to being professional. You're here to teach, not screw around with other kids. And if you're more focused on your students in that way rather than teaching them for the benefit of their health and the developing mind, then it's not going to help anyone in the long run. It even has the chance to irreparably damage your career. Basically, don't screw kids, it's that simple. Kind of reversed, but when I was in high school, I had a Spanish class that I was very advanced in, given the material. The teacher would often tutor me directly, and things seemingly got a bit flirty sometimes. We ended up actually hooking up one day after class. Homeschool was weird. Not a teacher, but when I was 22, I was the receptionist at a film school, university level, and had quite a flirty relationship with a few of the students, very male-oriented subject, and quite a few attractive ones. I ended up secretly going out with one of the students for 18 months. I would have lost my job if that had gotten out. I teach tutorials at university as a final year grad student. A student, who yes, I did find attractive, hit on me after our last tutorial, asking me out for coffee. I, with some reluctance because he was cute. For context, I am also a guy. Politely told him I'd be very busy the rest of the term, but he was welcome to email me next year to keep in touch if he wished. That'll be fine. He got the hint. No cute first year is worth throwing away the potential of an academic career. Also, our TA handbook has no rules for this sort of thing, and it really should. Never! The very thought makes me want to shower. Students are children, even the high schoolers. Yeah, I gave that one a funny voice, but seriously, don't screw kids. It's bad. Okay, thanks. Boring answer. I can safely say that I have taught some very attractive young women, but I've never been sexually interested. I mean, they are teenagers. What are they bringing to the party? Enthusiasm? I mean, they are like puppies. Cute, lots of energy, and no training. Sorry, I stopped shopping on the girls' floor immediately after I figured out where the women's department was. That's about the best way I could ever have heard someone put it. Not a teacher, but I have a story that's really odd. He was our grade 9 homeroom teacher. Let's call him Mr. Nee. Mr. Nee was married, had 2 kids and a darling wife who was a counselor at another school. A lot of people liked him, but he was known to choose favorites and non-favorites. I was a definite non-favorite, so I don't really have any kind words to say about him, but I digress. There was this one guy in our class, let's call him Ev. Ev was a typical wannabe gangster kid, from the saggy jeans to the DC lid. He was actually a really nice guy, but had an attitude at the same time. Me and him have talked once in a while since finishing high school, and he seems to be doing well with his new girlfriend and job. But again, I digress. Remember how I said Mr. Nee had favorites? Well, let's just say the way he treated his favorites looked like crap compared to how well he treated Ev. Ev practically could do anything in that class while everyone else had limits, even the favorites. Ev could come in late to class, not answer questions, and eat and drink whenever he wanted in class. But the one thing I'll never forget is how Mr. Nee would look at Ev occasionally as the class worked on an assignment or test. I really wish I had a picture, then you would probably understand where I'm going with this. It was pretty obvious to the majority of the class Mr. Nee had a thing for Ev, but as you can probably guess, it never went farther than the awkward glance and smile. Ev was completely oblivious to all of this, as he was just happy to have a free class without worry. Who wouldn't be? Mr. Nee still works at my junior high, and sadly, I do run into him a lot on my walks to and from certain places. I'll never know for a fact what Mr. Nee's fixation on Ev was, and it's probably better I don't know. I would just like to know this was just his way of being very nice to a student and nothing else. I used to teach college, and once in every few classes there'd be a really attractive woman, an adult in her early 20s, but a student. Thing being, after 2 or 3 classes, I'd realize I had no attraction to her at all because she just seemed so immature and naive. I don't mean that to sound mean, but I'm attracted to people who have as much life experience as I do, or more. So, much younger people just entering college might look very attractive, and might indeed even be very intelligent, but their sense of what the world was based on cumulative experience seemed fairly limited. So I basically stopped being more than idly attracted to them, the way you'd be when you passed a pretty woman in your office. There was never any real attraction at all. I'm a student, but I have a story I had with my female teacher. I had a teacher who was very attractive. She was 25 years old, blonde, witty, funny, and was also the volleyball coach. She began to drive me to school because she taught there. We lived in the same neighborhood, and I was also one of her favorite students the year before. Not because of great grades or anything. Actually, the opposite. Because I always screwed around in the class and made teaching, quote, fun and exciting for her. Her words, by the way. I also babysat her daughter, and her daughter loved me, so I had that going for me as well. Well, every morning before she took me, her husband, who worked as a garbage man, would be out working and her daughter was usually asleep, so we were alone most of the time. One day, as I watched her daughter and waited for her to get ready, she called from her room and told me to heat up the car and put her daughter outside. As I waited in the car for a while, I was getting pretty bored since her daughter was asleep and I went in to see if she needed any help. Well, I walked in and saw her walking from the bathroom to her bedroom completely topless and she locked eyes with me. I jokingly said, "Whoa, praise freaking Jesus," and did the triangle motion prayer thing and pointed towards the sky. She laughed as she walked back into her room. After this moment, she always seemed to be more flirtatious. She would talk closer to my face, held strong eye contact very often, and even started touching my leg. I reciprocated by also being flirty. I eventually switched schools at the end of the year, and we haven't had any contact since. Just recently, I had to get a recommendation letter for my applications, so I thought who better to ask than my favorite teacher, so I went over to her home. Her daughter had grown so much, and I've never seen a child so happy to see me. I sat down beside my teacher in the kitchen, and we talked for a long time, catching up on things. She said stuff like, "You've grown so much, and I missed you," which seemed mutual because I also missed talking to her. As her daughter watched TV, my teacher did the leg-touching thing again as she whispered about how she was a virgin until college, where she met her husband. She also said that her class is so freaking boring since I left, which I didn't think was completely true. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I was rock hard and she noticed. She said praise Jesus and we both laughed. Then, she grabbed it through my pants. It stopped suddenly when her daughter came up and asked to play with me, so I agreed and I played with her as my teacher wrote the letter of recommendation. After a few hours, I hugged her and her daughter and left the house with an empty feeling. I feel like I could have completed my high school fantasy, but I decided not to that day, mostly because of the fact that she had a husband I respected, and I know I would be really freaking mad if I had a wife who had sex with another person, mostly with a high school student. However, if stuff ever goes wrong with the husband, I will mostly try again. We love a mature person who won't interfere with the married relationship. My 6th grade teacher had a crush on the student teacher that came to help out for a couple months. Although not obvious, they screwed, and he proposed to her in front of the class soon after. They got married and had a kid 2 to 3 years later. For clarity, they screwed outside the bounds of the classroom. The teacher was a total fox as well. I would have loved to park my punch buggy in her garage. Reading that sentence was vile. I work in a school and have never felt this way about a student, but I've known 2 teachers who fell for students, took it too far, and got fired. Each of them were profoundly unhappy people. It seems that's mostly the case for a lot of teacher-student relationships that went south. Outside of abuse of power, these relationships start up to fill a void or indulge an empty desire. 9 times out of 10, it was never about true love in the first place. They never end up pretty unless they're consenting adults, and even then, things can end up pretty strained if they're not communicating with each other. I was 24 and she was 17, and I never did anything, but I totally acknowledged to myself that she was very pretty and clever. It made me feel weird, but I didn't sexualize her or anything. It was more a thought that, wow, if I was 7 years younger, I'd totally be into her. Right, we got it, bro. It is one of the most flattering things for an attractive student to take an interest in a subject that you are teaching. She's an undergrad, and you're TAing a subject that you are deeply interested in. Sure, her questions are novice, but she is enthusiastic and curious about your nerdy field in which you basically toil alone. If you make it past the first year without doing anything stupid, the next year you TA the same class, you meet a whole new year of students, and then you realize that there's a whole new crop of attractive young neophytes who bear a striking resemblance to your first crush last year, and that you are probably going to give more or less the same assistance to your students as last year, until you realize that in class you are helping everyone refine their understanding and move on, while you toil with few peers in the same subject that many will superficially take an interest in and move on year after year. Dude, you good? You need some you need some therapy for that little session? My secondary school English teacher had a crush on me. It wasn't obvious, but I saw it. She was a BBW as classed by my friends. We were 14 at the time. I really did sexualize her and imagine sex with her. I would often stare at her thighs and extremely wide hips in class. She would often pick me out to answer questions and was more relaxed with me while a little strict with others, as if we were good friends. She was a good teacher, definitely. Fast forward a few years and I just finished college. I get a Facebook request from my English teacher. I immediately knew why she added me. She was 22 when she worked with us, and that was what I told my brain when I wanted sex with her. We hooked up and had sex. I lived with her for a couple of months. I moved out, had more sex, etc. That's it, really. She just waited until I was old enough, and honestly, she gave better head than any of the other girls I was with.
What was the most messed up way you got back at someone that wronged you? Throwaways encouraged. Obviously, I'm going to use one. Back in high school, I dated a girl for 6 months before she decided it wasn't working out anymore, and she cheated on me with about 6 guys and stole my iPhone and wallet to buy illicit substances. I wanted to report her to the police like my parents encouraged me to, and to prevent me from doing such, her brother jumped me while I was walking home with his friends and busted open my lip pretty badly and threatened to kill me if I reported him or his sister. This is South Florida, so I believed he would do it. My dad got a new job and we moved to a new city, but I was still angry about this whole situation, so I did the next best thing. I created 2 fake Facebook accounts of a random hot girl and guy, spent some time making it look legit with friends and such, and added her brother on Facebook with the girl and my ex with the guy. It wasn't too long before he started flirting me up and tried his best to get in this girl's undies. On the other hand, having already courted my now ex, I knew exactly what to say to charm her to the point that she was in love with me. This was where it all started to get fun. I started a naughty texting relationship between the brother and sister, with me as the intermediate thanks to Google Voice. Both of them had fairly typical South Florida bodies, so nothing really gave anything away, and I did a fair amount of photoshopping to remove identifiers in the room that may give away anything. This went on for about a month and a half, totaling about 200 or so naked photos between the two of them, when I decided to reveal the curtain and send a group of unedited pictures that included key identifiers, faces, and rooms. Oh Lord, how stuff went down. I only wish I had some way to see how they reacted. Friends who still lived there told me her brother moved in with his dad that week and that they no longer spoke. All in all, about 4 months till I got my revenge, but it was amazing. You gosh darn sons of B-words. Someone told my ex about it and now she finally knows for sure that it was me. Sucks for her now that I live 2,000 miles away for college, but peas and Christ, Reddit. Don't go shooting your mouth off. Okay, well, in the spirit of the post heading, this was truly effed up. Listeners, don't be like either of these people. Friend and I were fishing at a local creek when my friend's brother pulled up. Being the eggplant he normally was, he started throwing rocks in the creek to scare the fish, and then he threw my friend's bike in the creek. We were 13 at the time, and my friend was crying, and I felt so bad, I jumped into the creek and got his bike out, and told him we would get his brother back. About a month later, we were fishing again, and it was the dead of summer. I told my friend, today is the day we get his brother back. Caught a 2 to 3 pound carp, threw it on the side of the bank, and left it there until we were done fishing. At the end of the night, we went back to his place. His brother's car was sitting on the street. We took the carp, sliced it open, threw it under the driver's seat, and rolled his windows 3/4 up. The next morning when we woke up and left, I forgot about what we had done. Well, when I rode past JT's car, I noticed the window was kind of black, and then I took a closer look. It was covered in flies. I actually got scared because I did not expect a window to be caked with flies. By the time I got home, I was laughing in tears because his brother was always such an eggplant to us. Fast forward to baseball practice about 3 days later. Friend had a black eye but smiled at me when we made eye contact. His brother flipped out and ran into his house and punched him in the face. His mum flipped out on his brother. Brother was grounded for the rest of the summer. His mum said that my friend would never do such a thing, and he played along and acted as if he had no idea. Apparently the smell never really left the car. We nicknamed his brother the Lord of the Flies. A school bully repeatedly knocked a binder from my best friend's hands every single day while we walked down the hall. Now, we were in high school back in pre-Columbine era, so people didn't freak out as often when kids did effed up stuff. I convinced my friend to stick tacks through an entire side of his binder, turning it into an extremely dangerous spiked weapon, and just hold on extra tight while waiting for the bully to come do his thing. The bully lacerated his hand pretty badly. After he slammed his hand down on it, my friend held on and yanked back. Jackass didn't try that crap again. Not me, my brother. When my younger brother was about 3, my father had to look after him for the day. The plan was that he, after asking his boss, would take him into work for the day. It was office work and he was friendly with his boss, so my mum assumed it was no big deal. My father, however, didn't want a toddler distracting him all day, so he left him in the car with the radio on and a carton of apple juice. This is Britain, so it wouldn't overheat, but either way he was being a crappy dad. At the end of the day, he returned back to his car to drive home, expecting a sleeping toddler who wouldn't tell his mother a thing. Instead, upon his return, he found his son jumping up and down on the front seats to the radio on full blast, naked and laughing, slipping around covered in poop. He had soiled himself, removed his nappy, and rubbed his fecal matter everywhere. Poop was smeared all over the driver's seat, the windscreen, the steering wheel, the sat-nav, the driver's window, even hand-printed on the ceiling. Our dad didn't even know toddlers could produce the vast amount of turd present. The only car seat that was completely untouched was his own. In summary, my 3-year-old brother was abandoned in a car for 8 hours, later found smearing his own brand Revenge paint all over my father's beloved BMW. One can only hope that the father in this story learned an important lesson in raising your gosh darn kids from this story. One time when I worked in a small video store as an assistant manager, there was this one customer who was being a real a-hole, to the point where I got fed up with his crap and threw him out. He had been a butthole to every single other employee in the store, including our boss. He was just a mouthy, harassing jerk. It would take way too long to go into the details. Anyway, I saw him in a little strip mall nearby one time, and he was bragging to some guys about how he was cheating on his workers' compensation. Then he pulls out this wad of cash and waves it under their noses like a Japanese fan. "I got all this effing money for free from lying about my injured hand." What an a-hole. Anyway, if you go into the blue pages of the phone book, you'll find this listing in all caps letters that says Workers' Compensation Fraud Hotline. And take a wild guess what video stores keep in their records. Full name, home address, and phone number. Not only did I turn this guy in, but I was also able to provide great detail as to exactly how he was faking his injury, as he explained it to his 2 friends. I moved around a lot as a kid. Dad in the army, parents divorced, not staying in one place made long-term friendships impossible. But my situation attracted bullies like flies. I moved to a new school. A bully picked up my scent instantly, tripping and shoving, making fun of my clothes. Nothing too terrible, but I was already unhappy, so I felt miserable anyway. One day at school, I asked to use the restroom. I passed said bully on my way into the bathroom. He actually didn't do anything to me this time. When I entered the restroom, someone was in the only stall, crapping on the floor. I walked out of the bathroom disgusted, ready to tell on them. I was 7 at the time. I was ready to re-enter my classroom when an incredible yet devious idea came to me. I went straight to my bully's classroom and walked inside. Everyone looked at me, which normally would have given me enough hesitation to turn 180 and go back to class. But that day, I didn't so much as pause. I walked up to the teacher's desk, pointed at my tormentor, and boldly proclaimed that he had crapped on the bathroom floor. My teacher's reaction was better than I could have expected. She made him follow her into the restroom while he cried and slobbered out, "I didn't do it! He's lying!" over and over again. She grabbed a wad of paper towel, handed it to him, and we watched as he picked it up and put it into the commode. She thanked me for telling her and told me to go back to my classroom. This happened about 20 years ago. I still look back at this moment as a turning point in my life, like I became me then. I used to live in a very small town, like 250 to 300 people. We had no stores, gas stations, etc. One day, a local guy decided to open up a little store that sold the basics like groceries and rented movies. He hired a few of us high school kids to work the store and promised us $50 a week for the summer to be paid at the end of the summer. We agreed and started working. We gave up a summer stocking shelves, cleaning the bathroom, lawn care, and whatever else. Well, the end of the summer comes around. It's our last day of work, and he comes in with our paychecks. $50 for each of us for the whole summer. Needless to say, we weren't too happy, but his words were, "Well, what the F are you gonna do about it? Drop off the key at my house since you won't need it anymore." We came up with a plan to pay this D-bag back. Before locking up the store for the last time, we left a window unlocked. We dropped the key off at the house. Around midnight, we were back at the store, grabbed as much as we could, cigarettes, money from the register, candy, probably about 1,000 worth of stuff, locked the window, then left through the emergency exit that had no alarm. There were also no cameras of any kind. Next day, there were cops there. He accused us all of doing it, but had no proof. He ended up having to shut down the store a few months later because the town heard how he didn't pay us and stopped doing business there. I don't feel bad. The F-word deserved it. Thanks for tripling my comment karma. Figures it's about a crime I committed 15 years ago. Should have used a throwaway. This is yet another 2 wrongs don't make a right, but consider me on the side of the exploited worker, especially after the owner admitted with the "what are you gonna do" comment. I have one I'm about to do in a couple of days. See, my parents suck. I've been taking care of them for a while also going to school and whatnot, and still they're trying to cheat me, pawn my things, etc. But I've become fed up with them. I'm out of town at the moment, but when I get back, the next time they ask me to walk 2 miles to get them a pack of cigarettes, I will walk outside, around the house, have a friend with a van come, bring my pre-packed stuff out of the basement entrance, leave and stay at my friend's house for a few days until my train ticket is planned for, then move 2,000 miles across the country and live with another friend who just got me a job, rendering them worthless pillheads waiting for a pack of Pall Mall Menthol 100s for the rest of their sad lives. I covered his ceiling fan with glitter. Fear me, mother effers. From another post. When I was 7 or 8, I did a science project on the antibacterial efficacy of various soaps. Basically involved keeping hands dirty for a day, pressing grubby thumbs into petri dishes full of agar, then washing and doing the same thing again. I'd take tracings of the cultures. Bigger colonies were bad, smaller ones good. This ended up winning the county science fair for my grade in a large metropolitan area, so that was nice. But before that, after I'd finished the experiments but before I'd discarded the dishes, I got into a dispute with my parents. Don't remember what about. I thought, I'll show them. So I took the nastiest culture and swabbed it onto their bedroom doorknob. They both got sick as dogs, and I had to take care of them for a couple of days. Served me right. I waged bacteriological warfare against my parents using my science project. But I told them long ago, and we laugh about it now. My past girlfriend cheated on me, and her and her roommate at the time had gotten to a point in their lease where they weren't super fond of each other and kept some distance. Her roommate was smoking hot, kind of annoying sometimes, and wasn't fond of my ex, so I decided to make a move on her. Best move ever. The look on my ex's face when her roommate walked me to the door in her undies after the first night was priceless. We proceeded to have hot, dirty, loud fun times almost nightly for 8 weeks until their lease was up, and for a while after that. My ex even walked in on us in the living room once. Kind of makes me a jerk, but gosh darn was it fun, and there's no way I felt bad about it. In summary, my girlfriend cheated on me, I have loud, awesome adult fun times with her roommate until the lease is up. And so it came to pass that the highest voted thing I will ever post on Reddit was under a throwaway in a "What's the most effed up thing you've ever done?" thread. Lol. Too late to the thread, but this is a good story. Everyone has worked with someone they've hated. I've never had a job where there wasn't someone who made my life miserable or whose very presence teed me off. Usually, you just have to put up with them, but every once in a great while, you can get even. Dave was a one-eyed Willie, stoop-shouldered, balding, in his 50s. Dave was a patronizing and irritating butthole. He had been at IBM his whole career, had been making good money, and hated contractors. He thought they were bad for the company, and that the only people worth a crap were regular employees, and he made it his priority to F with all of us. Nothing overt, but constant, subtle pressure was put on everyone whose badge said contractor on it. I think he developed this attitude from working with the guys from India, probably because they were so soft-spoken and accommodating, but maybe he was just a racist. I don't know. But whatever the reason, he took every opportunity to send us on little errands, wouldn't get back to us if we needed something, criticized anything we did, and generally made our lives heck in a way that couldn't be directly protested. I was pretty good friends with the guy sharing the room with him, another full-time employee, and one day, Robert called me up. War. We're going for coffee. Okay, let me just finish up a few things. You don't understand. We need coffee now. Right. I headed over to his office and he met me about halfway there. His eyes were shining with glee, but he wouldn't tell me what was going on until we had our coffee in the cafeteria. Once we finally had a table, he said, "Okay, Dave's a kink wrestler." Huh? He's a kink wrestler. Dude, I've got nothing. What the flip is a kink wrestler? It turned out that there were men who pay women to wrestle them into submission. Some of them did it as a sort of hobby, and others were extremely serious about it. Dave was one of the latter. Several times a year, he'd tell his wife that he was meeting up with old army buddies but went to kink wrestling conventions instead. They were highly organized, had rings set up for use, referees to score the matches, and everything. I'd never quite understand the need for refs, but hey, it's not my kink. There were web pages devoted to the women who were available to wrestle, and Dave's favorite was a woman named Red Robin. She was a tiny little woman who was an absolute beast, and he paid her thousands of dollars every time he'd go to one of these conventions for her to wrestle him for about 20 minutes per match. We went back to the office and pulled up Red Robin's website. Why does he pay this woman to wrestle him? She's ugly as heck. Do they do the deed after? He says no. Let me get this straight. Dave lies to his wife, flies out to California to have an ugly woman named Red Robin wrestle him into submission, pays her $400 per match, and doesn't bang her. Yep, bullcrap. I went on the main wrestling site and started reading Dave's posts, and there were a ton of them. He talked in great detail and depth about the sport, had invented his own move called the Twisted Ostrich, and told people about amazing matches he had won and lost. Look, I'm all about people's private lives remaining private, and I probably wouldn't have done anything if he hadn't so consistently been a POS to me the entire time. But he had, so game on. I registered a fake account under the name Suplex on the wrestling website and started corresponding with him. I started by asking him some technical questions about the Twisted Ostrich, but it wasn't long until he started asking me personal questions. As time went by, I fleshed out the character, so within about a month, he had become quite good friends with Miss Plex. I told him I was a late 20s, single lawyer living in DC. My marriage had ended because my husband just didn't understand my interest in such a harmless sport. It was so nice to talk to someone like him who really understood me. It was unbelievably satisfying. Every time he'd send me on some stupid errand, I'd think of how he was confessing his private life to the character I'd created. Oh, and he lied his ass off. He dropped a good 10 years and his wife somehow. Finally, he asked for a picture. Well, I'd already downloaded a whole set of a girl who looked about that age, and the photos didn't look professional. I started with a simple one, and he gushed about how hot I was. Over the next few weeks, I sent him more and more photos, each revealing more than the last, until the girl was fully nude, but didn't look posed. He started trying to be really sexy and started talking about the best way to end a good wrestling match was by doing the deed. Hold the phones. He had told Robert that there wasn't any fun times at the matches. I probed a bit and he finally admitted that he did the deed with the girls he wrestled. I effing knew it. They were ladies of the night working a special kind of crowd. It made more sense that he was spending $400 per match. I amped up the racy talk too, including wrestling into it. It was gold. He was hooked. His work slowed down, he became with Suplex, and quite frankly, my work suffered as well, having to answer all his notes. Fortunately, he didn't notice because he was too busy sending off love letters. Now it was driving me nuts, because here was this creepy 50-ish guy who was still giving me a daily ration of crap, but was secretly having an online affair with the character I'd created. Robert and I had a ton of fun effing with the poor guy, but one day he called me up again. War, coffee, now. At the cafeteria, he told me that Dave had another army reunion coming up, and we should see if we could get him to come to DC to meet Sue instead. Genius. I sent Dave an email and said we should get together sometime. Boom. In a flash, he responded that he had been thinking the same thing and had some time off in a few weeks. Would I be interested in him coming to visit? Yes I would. As Sue, I arranged to meet him in DC at a local hotel. As the day approached, Dave became more and more excited and effed with us less and less. He still tried, but the conviction and heat wasn't there anymore. Robert and I were going nuts, having to act like nothing was going on while Dave prattled on about how happy he was to hook up with his old army buddies, what a fun trip it would be, how he was hoping he didn't get pinned down by the snow, etc. I guess he thought he was being clever, but since we already knew the entire story, it just came across as pathetic. He left early on a Friday to catch his flight, smiling like a champ. Tuesday morning, he showed up looking like his best friend had died. We asked him what was wrong, and he tried to play it off like he was just tired from his long weekend. But as soon as he could, he sent Sue a message asking what the heck had happened, and why hadn't she showed up. We waited to respond until after lunch. He was a basket case. Finally, we fired back a furious message that we'd called his house on Friday just to leave him a message, and some woman answered. We said we'd pretended to give her a survey, and we knew about his wife and 4 kids. So he had been lying to us all along. Basically, we went bat-crap crazy on him. We told him if he ever tried to contact us again, we'd tell his wife everything. We waited for him to get the email, watched him surreptitiously read it, and then we watched him have a meltdown. He started sweating like crazy, called his wife to check on her, and finally left early. He was never the same after that. He pretty much stopped messing with the contractors and kept to himself. We never sent him any more emails, and he never sent any to Sue. My contract ended not too long after that, and that was the last I heard of him. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Motorsarg Manon gave me Reddit gold for this story. Thanks, man.
D&D players of Reddit. What is the most creative character you've seen someone play as? I once kidnapped a player character wizard and replaced them with a high-level illusion created by the BBEG. The player then had to control the illusion from the perspective of the BBEG. That's Big Bad Evil Guy, pretending to still be a member of the party. It was surprisingly effective. Just as they reached the BBEG, they were slowly realizing he wasn't helping much anymore. I played as a Wemmick back in college, and I loved that character. He was a druid, and thus could only carry wooden weapons. So, after thinking about it, I gave him a lance, and then proceeded to get every feat you could for a knight on horseback. Trample, charges, etc. I leveled like a monster class instead of a player class, aka slow as snails, but man, it was a hella fun character. He could do some insane damage by the end of the game, and if he had to get into close combat, he could do rake, bite for damage. My favorite part, though, were his two animal companions. The first was a weasel that took levels of thief. So it was our trap dismantler and eventually had vorpal front teeth, so it had a devastating bite attack. The second was, and I'm not kidding, a giant white blood cell. It had been magicked out of a giant and made even larger, and it rode around on my druid's back. As the group's healer, it would blob onto them and heal them with a few levels of cleric. Mind you, my druid was teamed up with the lizardman barbarian, who was surprisingly smart, and the fey bard that would drink anything put in front of him, which is how he ended up as a half-elf woman of a different alignment by the end of the game. The Fae had a long-standing thing about drinking anything put in front of him. The campaign was heading to a big showdown between our ragtag group and what we thought was a terrible wizard. As it turned out, she was a high-level alchemist and had been using her potions to do much of her deeds. Unfortunately, when she was gone, all of her potions were sitting there, and the Fae decided, why not? Then panicked when he changed gender and drank something else, then another, and kept rolling hysterically on this table the DM had whipped up. A camel. Not just any camel, but a racing camel named Rocket Boots. We had a party member who was inconsistent about showing up for the games, and he showed up in the middle of a short campaign we were running after we had received a stolen racing camel. It's hard to say exactly what it was, but the guy went ham role-playing this camel, making camel noises and doing camel things. It was absolutely hilarious. I haven't done it yet, but I've always wanted to play as a true polymorphed chair. The chair was turned into a human, or any player race, and then started learning, maybe becoming a wizard himself. I don't know how anyone would ever know since the change becomes permanent, but if he ever walked through an anti-magic field, he would just turn back into a chair and be gone forever, and no one else would walk through there for fear of being turned into a chair. I played with a 100% randomly generated character. I had a decent combo of class and race, half-elf and ranger, but my stats were completely dysfunctional for a ranger. My worst stats by far were dex and wisdom. In fact, they were the worst in the group. I was the ranger that could do everything a ranger was not supposed to do, and nothing that a ranger was actually supposed to do. For one campaign, I played a gnome illusionist and put all the points into alchemy. With my starting gold, which the DM gave us way too much, and few limitations, I bought a riding dog, 2 saddlebags of holding, and then another for my own carrying. I spent the rest of my gold on all the mundane gear you could possibly imagine. I used a spreadsheet to track it because the DM was irritated. I had 3 years of food and water, 3 tents, 10 cots, a collapsible bathtub, gnome-sized, everyone else can bring their own. A collapsible chair and desk for scribing scrolls, a portable alchemist lab, all manner of rope, poles, tools, containers, and even a few weapons. I packed trail cakes, fine wine, and a few pounds of honey. I think the only other magic items I took besides the bag of holding was a firestone. Don't recall the exact name, but it produced a fire from small campfire up to huge bonfire and renewed the item after 8 hours or so. I wish that campaign had gone on longer. I really enjoyed pulling random stuff out of my bag and then making the DM refer to the printed copy I had handed him 2 weeks ago, showing that yes, I did in fact have half a pound of marbles. Well, at least you didn't lose them. I gotta go. Bye-bye. My current campaign is made entirely from players who are new to D&D, myself included. So in building characters, my friend rolled mostly average stats, with the exception of intelligence, so he has a -3 in that. So we basically determined that he's illiterate. During our campaign, he also referred to the DM as God as a joke, and he kept asking questions like, "All right, God, what do we do about this?" So I made a joke that it looks like his character is actually communicating with God on a regular basis, but everyone around him just thinks he's insane and will never believe him. He then got the personality trait, Divine Guidance, which allows him to have a helpful hint once per campaign session. So canonically, his character can communicate with God, but to everyone else, he's just talking to himself as a result of his intellectual ineptitude. In plain English, a monk who fought everything by punching it repeatedly in the privates, Pathfinder monk with the maneuver master archetype who spammed dirty trick maneuvers. The look on the DM was priceless when they read the rules. Here's how it went. I tripped the tiger. Okay. Rolls the dice. Yep, the tiger's now prone. I elbow drop the tiger in his fierce privates. Okay, so a regular unarmed strike. Oh, no. There are rules for that. No, there aren't. I beg to differ. The rules are this. You can attempt to hinder a foe in melee as a standard action. This maneuver covers any sort of situational attack that imposes a penalty on a foe for a short period of time. Examples include kicking sand into an opponent's face to blind him, pulling enemy's pants down to have his speed, or hitting a foe in a sensitive spot to make him sickened for a round. Huh. I guess you can punch the tiger in the privates. All the fights went from epic fantasy battles to this monk pocket sanding, private punching, and pantsing his way through every enemy. I don't know if there are any Joy Quest fans that are listeners to these kind of videos, but I was the dungeon master for Joy Quest, and I actually had a very similar situation to this. One of the players played literally as Jackie Chan, but he kind of named himself as like Jackie Chan. He actually had to fiddle around with this as well by implementing the way of the open hand in scenarios that weren't combat. So arm wrestling. So in one of the episodes, he actually tried to do like a bunch of different dexterity checks, and he tried to like slime and gum up his hands with a bunch of spit or some spilled ale, and basically try to cheat his way to the prize. Players. I've got a friend who is a weird character machine. Most recently is an orc named Sterog who believes that weapons are a coward's weapon, and beats people to their end with his shields. Before that was Robert the Destroyer, a barbarian who threw ladders at people. There was $3.50, or $3.50 to his friends, a really creepy monk who could shoot vines out of his hands like Spider-Man. Villigamish, a 5e warlock who halfway through a random goblin encounter realized he was terminating them for no reason and became a staunch defender of goblin rights. Harold the Great and Powerful was a bard who was absolutely useless, but invested everything in bluff and insisted he was a high-level wizard. Also had a penchant for buying people's souls and then pushing them towards positions of power. The Bear Witch Project, aka BWIP, or Bruce Berner, was a lycanthrope witch that spent most of his time in half-bear form. When asked what his gut feelings were on a topic, he responded with, "I have many feelings on guts." And of course, Justin Chandler, a shaman who saved literally all his gold till level 7, then used it to permanently enlarge and awaken his pet frog and deck it out with sweet gear. A player made a dwarf who was actually a very small human raised by dwarves. He was a barbarian and was modeled after Macho Man Randy Savage. He had a pet Wolverine, which he would throw at people screaming, "The fastball special!" The Wolverine didn't last too long. Randy, throughout the campaign, slowly went insane due to his fear of magic. Randy then began cutting people's hands off for no apparent reason, and the legend of Macho Man ended when he attempted to suplex a dragon. Suplexing a dragon. I mean, this sounds like an epic tale if you think about it. Just like this little man's like walking up this huge like ancient dragon just, "Mere mortals, they feared me for thousands of years. What will you do?" "I'll do like I always do. I'm gonna go in for that suplex. You need yourself a Slim Jim." And then unfortunately is crushed. Wow, what a tale. It's been a long time, but as I remember it, my buddy was using Middle-earth as the setting. My character was an elf with polymorph abilities, hung out in Mirkwood, and while transformed as various woodland creatures, spied on passerby on behalf of Gladriel. Spending 100+ years in Mirkwood changed her into something a bit more enty. Not physically, just personality. Lazy. Likes to talk about trees. At this point, I wasn't tainted with min-maxing or metagaming, so I was more than content to make this weird, awesome elven forest woman with no social or combat skills and send her into an adventure based on subterfuge, navigating deserts, and combat. I was also interested in making an elven woman who wasn't the Tolkien archetype. More awkward, homely, blunt, super into trees and tree stuff, and not the usual, "let's make dope skyscrapers out of these redwoods" way, but more like, "let me tell you which tree sap tastes best right off the bark." So she ended up being whisked away, reassigned to an adventure in the east past Mordor, in a desert where, according to the DM, Tolkien's mentioned in only one paragraph, blue wizards were hiding. She was very upset with her reassignment. Over the course of the adventure, because wizards, she got stuck as a parrot, rode another character's shoulders. Perfect disguise. Lots of scouting, lots of complaining about not being in Mirkwood, and also being a parrot. Many Mirkwood facts. Mirkwood reminisces, drawing maps of Mirkwood in the sand with a talon. The entire time, I had her advising the party that returning to Mirkwood would be the best option. That said, when the enemy least expected it, BAM! Sleep mist and trash talk punctuated with WALKS! Surprisingly effective. We never finished the campaign, so I like to imagine she just abandoned them at some point, and there's a colorful parrot flying happily around Mirkwood, perching on a character who's actually from Mirkwood, not Treebeard, who I've been reminded is from Fangorn. See, all I know is Mirkwood squawk, nothing else. It was fun to think about this again after all this time. Now I'm probably going to remake her as an important NPC in my new wilderness adventure-based campaign. I don't know why, but for some reason when I imagine this like very chill elven woman who's just so attached to the forest, whenever she's like in like this parrot form, I just picture Iago. So like, can you imagine like that change between just like, "Hello, I am an old elven woman here to guide you on your path back to Mirkwood," to, "Hey, you know what? I don't like being a parrot. This is ridiculous. Hey, let's go back to Mirkwood and check out the tree bark, huh? Brah!" I once played a game where the players did not know any of their stats. Everything was run by descriptions like, "you're really good at getting into places that you shouldn't," picklock skill, or "you're bleeding from several wounds and are nearly at death's door." If it were that kind of game, the players wouldn't necessarily know where they were. By the way, it was the best campaign I'd ever been a part of. The GM was a freaking genius. We were in the Marines together, and he got orders to go to Korea. When he came back, he no longer played and wouldn't associate with us nerds anymore. Dude was a natural, and I never found out just what happened. All I know is he didn't find religion, as suggested. I think he was met with anti-nerd peer pressure, which is funny because the nerds were also Marines, so there it is. A thief with one level of illusionist that passed himself off as an arch-wizard, throwing fireballs and screaming, "These beasts are immune to magic!" Ooh! in a fight, which was a funny experience. He was good at scamming NPCs though. My character is similar to that, a thief that pretends that what he does is all magic. We were supposed to be infiltrating a cult that was gathering a presence in this town. The other people in my party joined the guard, and I was going to investigate the city's criminal underworld. And then I got distracted and ended up convincing a bunch of people of my magical power and how I can make them as good as me. So I became the kingpin of the criminal element in the city. It ended up not helping us find the cultists at all. But when we found them, I had an army. A necromancer who thought they were a cleric. Only the player and DM knew and had a list translating what the player said they were doing and what they were actually doing, i.e. spells, daily prep, so the others wouldn't catch on out of character. In his formative years, he came upon a book of forbidden spells. Being young and stupid, he assumed it was a book of divine rituals. Fast forward several years, and he wanders the land preaching about the everlasting life. He's skilled in first aid and potions because not every scrape requires divine intervention, but has some spells that will bring someone back from the brink of death. He also has a bodyguard who wears full plate armor, who follows him around because he owes a life debt. Doesn't talk much though. The other players never discussed removing their own armor, or eating, or using the bathroom, so nobody found it odd that the NPC never did. The other players also never took points in Knowledge Arcane to discover the spell effects that didn't match what they should. Unfortunately, he got found out when one of the party members went down, and he turned them into a zombie. The players were then in on the joke and weren't able to separate what they knew and what their characters knew, which is why they weren't told from the start. If the party member hadn't gone down, there was a plan to have a personal quest, in a trial of faith style, to see if he could unintentionally turn himself into a lich, and if the party would help him do so. Mimic companions are what made me fall in love with the concept of tabletops and random chance. Just messing around with a friend of mine, he happened upon a mimic, fed it a live fairy that was annoying him, and it became his friend for life. That mimic NPC rolled natural 20s like it was his freaking job, and honestly, single-handedly carried the party, with a bit of help from a sentient severed goblin hand, for the rest of the series. All the players had terrible rolls for hours, and just sat in wonder while Mimic and Handy wrecked a Lich Dragon. All hail the mighty luggage. There was a campaign where the party came across a magical cauldron filled with boiling gold. They were told they could drop an item in and it would be turned to gold while retaining all of its other properties and be imbued with intelligence. They were warned that the said intelligence might be malevolent. While the party debated what to drop in, the gnome rogue jumps in. He became gold-coated, which increased his armor class significantly, but also became cursed with an evil alter ego. There was much rolling to determine when and for how long he was forced to play as chaotic evil. I played a human fighter. He was a carpenter, had a wife and children. He was a really kind man, so kind in fact, he didn't carry a weapon. He was non-violent. His flaw, however, was that he had a massive malignant brain tumor pressing on his amygdala. Since they didn't have CAT scans in this universe, no one knew that he had inoperable brain cancer. Whenever our party was in a situation that caused great stress, like combat for example, my character would slip into a sort of trance and go on a rampage in the battlefield. He was absolutely stacked in combat, so he would absolutely clean the hell up when it hit the fan. The gentle carpenter would turn into a snarling, mumbling maniac who royally crapped on anyone who dared oppose him. He would come out of the trance with no memory of the fighting. Since he didn't carry a weapon, this required some creativity, so I made my character a master of improvised weaponry. Before combat, I would ask the DM if there was anything in the room I could lift above my head. Whatever was nearest is what I used as a weapon. Chair, stones, dead enemy's femur, you name it. My character was a whirlwind of bottles, debris, and the occasional small animal. A true force to be reckoned with. His name was Buin the Machine Rodriguez. Buin? I mean, I'm still invested. This is a very cool character concept, kind of like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde scenario, but like with like actual medical knowledge behind it. But the name Buin throws me off. Is that like a short term for like brain, I guess? But I just can't help to be like, my name is Buin the Machine Rodriguez. So, you want me to use my fists, huh?
Students of Reddit, what's the story of the worst teacher you ever had? Had a science teacher that insisted cells were not made of atoms, and that therefore either leaves weren't alive or diamonds were. When I was at primary school, for ages I think around 7 or 8 till 11 in the UK, we had a class on human reproduction education. A kid asked the teacher about female eggs and how that works, only for her to scream at him that women do not have eggs and not to be stupid. Screw you, Brighton Junior School. This was about my class in the 9th grade. We were about 15 or 16 then. We had chemistry and we were learning about atoms and molecules. Almost everyone in class thought there was a molecule for everything, like a strawberry molecule for example. Then when I pointed out that they must have misunderstood it all, they acted like I was dumb or something. Look at stupid Brenda over here doesn't understand that there's a strawberry molecule. I had a math teacher who would leave the class to ask another teacher how to do certain math problems. Sometimes he'd be gone as long as 30 minutes during a 50-minute class period. Suffice to say, no one in that class learned much math. If it makes you feel any better, the teacher probably was given the class against his wishes. Math classes are often very hard to fill, particularly since they are a challenging set of skills for not much pay, compared to other opportunities. As such, schools sometimes ask unqualified people to teach math class because they need someone. I can confirm, I was supposed to teach math one year, and the school called me on a Friday before school started and informed me that they needed me to teach science instead, and if I could please come in over the weekend to set up my lab. Do you know how much prep should go into a successful year of science? You basically should set up your curriculum in advance, plan out all the lab exercises, lobby your school for the money, and order all the supplies. You can't just walk in and wing a year of science with 130 kids when you've never taught the subject before. As you can tell, I'm not bitter at all. All of these stories remind me of how bad substitute teachers are. Like, I think my old high school just got random people off the streets to teach. I once had a sub who wore doctor's hairnets over his shoes and asked me what I wanted to be in life. When I said I wanted to make films, he laughed in my face and said that's not happening. Education is a joke in the States. My English lit professor was late to class every day. She was clearly on substances. On top of that, she didn't even shower. Her hair was matted, and she was so rude. She gave us homework and never took it up or graded it, and then would show up and say it's test day with no warning. I had to drop the class after I failed the first test. I believe most of the class dropped after that exam as well, and she didn't come back next semester. I mean, if she was on substances, then clearly the English class was pretty lit. One time while taking an exam in my Calculus 2 class, I got a random bloody nose that dripped right onto the test. After explaining what happened, my teacher said if I leave the room to go clean up, I wouldn't be able to retake the test. My options were to grab another test and start over halfway through without being able to copy my previous answers, or leave and fail the exam. I walked out of the classroom and withdrew before I even got to my car. You should have bled all over the test and handed it in. And with that evidence, if they kept it, went to the dean or someone else in administration. I have steady nosebleeds of up to a minute every now and then, and that's while lying down. I honestly couldn't take the chance of continuing to write while I bled for just a gotcha moment with a jerk teacher. FYI, as a nosebleeder myself, don't lay down when you got one. In case you didn't know, tilting your head back is also a lie. Both things just make it worse. This is about my Welsh professor. She assigned textbooks that were out of print, couldn't explain anything to save her life, responded to questions by repeating herself, and her syllabus was just header info and a single line that said, "The purpose of this class is to learn Welsh." In the 2nd grade, had a cool girl named Deja in my class. Our class made a joke where we'd say Deja and then boo in a loud and deep voice. The teacher was super ticked off and took Deja's bag, the rectangular one with the 2 metal bars on the back, and slammed it against her back. I heard the most blood-curdling scream of all time, and the whole class just fell silent. I don't know what happened to the teacher since that was near the end of the year and I moved away after that school year ended, for unrelated purposes. The teacher physically assaulted Deja because y'all made a joke about her name? Holy freak. Yeah, I felt so bad for Deja and the memory keeps coming back to me sometimes. I don't know why I think about it, I just do. Hearing that story made me really think that I probably would have taken part in that joke because saying deja vu sounds kinda cool. But I could see how it would suck if you didn't like the joke. I was once humiliated by my teacher because the guy I had a crush on was in another class came into our classroom to ask my teacher something. A lot of my classmates started giggling and one of them called my name for several desks away, as if I possibly didn't notice that my crush had entered the room. I was the one that ended up getting in trouble and the teacher threatened to send me into my crush's class and have everyone laugh at me, even though I hadn't said or done anything besides go bright red. My bad for having friends who knew I liked a boy, I guess. Not saying what happened was right, but I'm embarrassed as freak by everyone's behavior. I wouldn't wish any aspect of this situation on anybody, but God, that teacher hated me. This was a gym teacher. The other kids would often bully me and sometimes beat me up. She would only intervene if I fought back, and that was to punish me and me alone. I went to the guidance counselor one time after getting kicked out and told him what happened. He called her and she said I was the one attacking them and they did nothing, since she was the teacher and I was the student. You can guess who the guidance counselor believed. This was my entire elementary school life. I could have 6 jerks pushing me around, calling me names, hitting me, trying to pants me, etc. That's all fine. Throw one punch and break their nose, detention for a week. Literally had the exact same thing happen to me as well. I would get ISS, in-school suspension, and the other girl would get nothing. I am also a girl, but I was a very tall 12-year-old. So whenever I would fight back, they would assume I caused more damage, even though I was the one being picked on and did not start the fight and was only defending myself. Years later, my mom said they wanted to permanently suspend me, but she threatened to sue them since they admitted to her that I was the one being bullied and couldn't do anything about it in writing. Good thing though is the ISS teacher was very nice to me and would let me do whatever I wanted as long as I did all my homework and stayed quiet. Got a lot of good quality reading done. I had the opposite effect with teachers in school. Every time I was about to get into a fight, one magically appeared. I remembered one time I was in gym and this kid was walking up to me ready to fight me and my math teacher showed up out of nowhere and stopped us. It's like she had instant transmission. A teacher once told me that sand was a liquid because you could pour it. I then raised my hand and told her that if you had enough big containers, you could pour bowling balls. The class laughed and about 10 minutes later I sneezed. She thought I said BS and sent me to the principal's office. The worst teacher I ever had was my shop/gym teacher in high school. He would not do anything at all. I was able to smoke in shop class and in gym as long as I was outside running laps or something. I never once heard him tell anyone about safety measures when using shop equipment. A few people got hurt and one actually lost half a thumb, but the worst thing he ever did was hire some of the grade 9 and grade 10 girls to babysit for him and his wife. He would leave his wife at the bar and go home to check on the kids, and was eventually caught hooking up with one of them. After a police investigation, they found a ton of homemade content on his laptop of him hooking up with these girls. Last I heard, he went to jail for life. This was all in a town of less than 300 people. Similar thing happened to a hall monitor I knew. Dude went on to be a coach at another school and was apparently doing pretty well. Threw it all away because he started to date a student. What an idiot. In the 5th grade, I had a teacher who disliked me because I was bullied a lot and she had to take care of it and talk to my parents a lot. One day I was playing kickball and got borderline assaulted by some kids and she saw, came over and let them go inside. She looked at me covered in dirt and said, "Don't go telling your dad about this." Next day, my dad went into the school and had a very long talk with this teacher and the principal. I'm pretty sure she was hoping the school year would end sooner. Damn, I had the same teacher in the same grade who would never stop screaming at one student named Nate. I ended up kind of becoming friends with him, but didn't see him much after 7th grade. It got to the point where it seemed like she would go out of her way to find some reason to scream at him. She even screamed at him when some student smuggled a staple gun into the lunchroom and began firing it at Nate, claiming he was doing horseplay or something. The kid with the staple gun got away scot-free. Same kid also hit me with the rubber band next year until I almost cursed. Luckily, my teacher was really friendly and said, well, I would have too. That really hurts. I had a computer science teacher who didn't really teach the class. First day of school, he stood up and said, I'm going to be honest with you guys. We're going to be learning this material together. He then pushed us all into online code camps. The beginning of every class, he also spent about the first 20 minutes going over anything under the sun except for programming. If your phone went off at any point during class, he said that you had to buy the entire class donuts, but he was exempt from this rule. My programming teacher also had similar teaching strategies. The first day he said, you guys will just be learning on codes and I'm gonna monitor you. He then proceeded to play the Winnie the Pooh baseball video game every class, even promising kids A's if they could beat it on the hardest difficulty, as the rest of us struggled to actually program. First off, where can I play Winnie the Pooh baseball, because I always hear about that game? And secondly, my economics teacher in college had the same rule about donuts. His phone actually went off once and the whole class was like, ooh, and he bought us donuts the next class. It was awesome. Some crazy substitute we had for geography hit the computer monitor to the floor because of a fly. It landed beside me and I nudged it off with my paper. My elbow knocked the dictionary off the table and I was, and I quote, isolated from class for throwing a dictionary across the room. I was pissed off. When I was in kindergarten, my first teacher got pregnant, so she had to take maternity leave. She then got replaced with a substitute teacher to teach my class for the rest of the school year. She was very strict and she was not very nice. I had issues with her, but I was a very good student, quiet and to myself. One day I asked her that I had to use the bathroom, but she refused to let me go. I really had to go, but ended up peeing myself. I remember going to the nurse and they called my mom. My mom went to the school and had a meeting with the teacher, the principal, and someone else. 2 days later, that teacher was fired. At least she didn't do the, I don't know, can you? Bit when you asked to go to the bathroom. Every time a teacher did that, I wish I peed myself. I remember my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Doge, being super strict. She was pregnant and took maternity leave. The substitute was the nicest teacher ever, and she was appalled that Mrs. Doge had never read us a single book. When I was in the 9th grade, the school I went to could not afford enough books for everyone in the English classes to have a copy to take home. They only had like 30 copies and they had like 4 classes of 25 students. So what they did was have us read in class. But rather than have each of us read to ourselves, the teacher read to us. I think this was because they wanted the entire class to be at the same place in the book. This was the 9th grade. It was a little insulting, in my opinion, to have the teacher read to us. The teacher quickly realized that it's no fun reading the same chapter to 25 students 4 times a day. So she brought a tape recorder and would record herself reading to the first class. The 3 other classes got to sit there and listen to the recording of her reading the chapter while she sat at her desk doing God knows what. I've never been one of those who liked wasting time, so I went to the library and checked out a copy of whatever book we were reading and would read it at home. I would finish it in a couple of nights, whereas it would take a week or more to have it read to us in class. The English class was my second to last class of the day, so I would use that time to do homework from my other classes that day. Ideally, not to have any work to do after school. An English teacher I had in high school asked the class to spend half of the class in the library, finding a love poem. I chose Sonnet 130 by Shakespeare. It's not your standard love poem. It says nothing nice about the lady until the very end. She failed me on the project. The very next project was to choose a poem that described our general feelings around the time. I chose a poem from the existentialists. I don't recall exactly which one, but it was about bad thoughts, if you catch my drift. Again, I failed the project. I never forgot her response after I read it aloud. Why would you choose something so awful and sad? A girl in the class said, maybe that's how he feels. She sent me to the principal's office for punishment. By the end of that year, I was in the mental hospital for acting on those bad thoughts. I was there for 3 months. I feel bad for the OP in this story. I had an English teacher that failed me because I used the words explosions in the sky for a poem, and she told me I plagiarized because that was the name of a band. My next poem was about how my English teacher sucked, and I got a passing grade. I was so confused. In middle school, I'm in college now, I had the displeasure of experiencing a married math/humanities teacher duo who were horrible people and took their relationship issues out on their students. The math teacher was just extremely freaking weird and would go on strange rants, scream, and clip her toenails in class, and clip her nails in class. This happened during a test once. The only sound that could be heard was pencil scratching and the clipping of her nails. I still remember it and shudder. She also made up ridiculously hard to follow technical rules about formatting that would ruin your grade and even put you in detention if you didn't follow them correctly, like drawing the exact margins on homework, boxing answers, and getting all of your work signed by a parent. I was a good kid, but went to detention for the first time that year. Eventually, half the class was in and out of detention every week. Worst of all, she seemed to single out her students to torment at random. I, a small, shy, emo Hispanic girl, was her favorite target. I remember her once yelling at me in class to the point of making me cry for fidgeting with my eraser. She described it as playing with dirt. She brought it up relentlessly in class for a month, calling me dirty in front of my classmates. The worst thing is that when she saw my friend eating a cookie in the hall, for some reason, she absolutely flipped her lid and tried to force her to spit the cookie into her hand because eating in the hall was not allowed, a rule that was never enforced. My friend apologized but naturally refused, swallowing the cookie that was already in her mouth, and thought that was that. The teacher continued to scream at her, got her detention, and tried to get her suspended. Her husband was the humanities teacher. Think history, current events, and social studies. He was, to put it lightly, a blatant racist. When we talked about the Holocaust or the slave trade, he would ham-fistedly point out the Jewish or black kids in the class and basically be like, just like your ancestors, and keep bringing up the kids as examples despite clearly making them uncomfortable. This wasn't even the most blatantly offensive part. During parent-teacher conferences, he literally told my mom, an immigrant, and myself to our faces that I was late and often valued socialization over hard work because I was a Latina. He said something along the lines of, just because it's okay in your culture doesn't make it okay here. I taught in Costa Rica once. I should know. I was a meticulous worker who would chat with friends here and there, but not excessively, which of course wasn't the most messed up part about his statement. Me and my mother were speechless, and she didn't say anything, but there was tears in her eyes, and she was understandably mortified and angry. His words hurt me, but it hurt most of all to see her like that and feel so helpless. They both continuously berated me in class and gave me unreasonably bad grades. I was a quiet, extremely shy, hardworking kid, known for being a bit of a goody two-shoes. Before their classes, I never had any academic difficulty, and humanities was my favorite subject. After a while, I shrunk completely. I stopped trying in both of their classes. I was so ashamed, frustrated, and scared of them. My already low self-esteem dropped considerably, and my anxiety in the class situations worsened. Although I consider myself to be quite intelligent and was able to still get A's after their classes, all throughout high school, I retained any aversion to speaking to my teachers and contributing in class, causing my academic life to suffer quite a bit. So Mr. and Mrs. Penn, F you, and I'm glad you got fired and divorced. I hated teachers like this, and being a kid who spoke up, I often got in trouble. I once told my film teacher that he was ruining people's projects with his input. For example, one kid had this dramatic film that was supposed to end with a murder scene. Our teacher thought it would be better if the guy was tied up and had syrup poured on him. It was the stupidest idea ever. Oh, and he loved adding fart jokes to everything. My second grade teacher was Sister Bridget. She didn't like me at all. One day I was feeling ill, and I asked to use the restroom. She told me I was lying, as she tried to tell me why I was a liar, which led me to vomit all over her shoes. Maybe it was a holy vomit. Okay, maybe not the worst teacher, but definitely the strangest. Mr. Pratt. He was a substitute teacher I had in high school in the 90s. Inner city school, he was an older black dude with a loud mouth. There were a lot of jerk students, though, who always mouthed back to every teacher, which made learning difficult. Mr. Pratt had an odd choice when responding to these kids. Imagine a well-dressed but definitely urban-sounding substitute who, when a student tried to act out, would pull out a freaking puppet, obviously custom-made and looked just like him, suit and all, out of his desk. He would then start berating the student via the puppet. The puppet was called Pratt Daddy, by the way. He would make the student talk to the puppet and apologize. Most didn't. They were laughing and tried to talk over Pratt Daddy, in which case Pratt Daddy, the puppet, would kick them out of class and lock the door. Then the puppet went back into the desk drawer and Mr. Pratt continued his lessons. It was odd. I feel like that is something you would have seen on a sitcom. But Pratt Daddy would have probably hit the students with a stick. My former tutor for year 9, also the art teacher, she refused to take action when somebody created a Snapchat account under my name and sent unclothed images to dozens of people around my school. Shortly after this, I got into a fight because a guy was still pissed about the Snapchat situation and punched me in the jaw when I had a retainer. From this, she decided to secretly send loads of emails to my mother suggesting that I, more than likely, have autism. I have since basically been forced into getting checked up on, only for doctors to confirm that I don't have enough symptoms for a diagnosis. She treated me really poorly in the art lessons and did very little to get involved with me when I reported or got witness being bullied. That's it for this video. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. It's linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching and we'll see you guys next time.